Chapter 81. Ye Tian could see Yunfeng's talents at a glance. Status, human. Cloud wind. Cultivation talent, extraordinary. Windblade talent, top. Speed talent, medium. Rumor had it outside that Yunfeng only possessed an elementary speed talent, so learning it had risen to medium stunned Ye Tian. Don't be fooled by the names. The gap between elementary and medium is enormous. An elementary speed talent multiplies one's base speed by 3. A medium speed talent multiplies it by 5. For example, if Yunfeng's base speed was already 5 times the speed of sound, an elementary speed talent would raise him to 15 times the speed of sound, while a medium speed talent would push him to 25 times. The difference between 15 times and 25 times is night and day. Yunfeng had truly been lucky. Not only had he elevated his cultivation talent to extraordinary while in the secret realm, he'd also improved his speed talent from the elementary rank to medium. With his intermediate speed talent, no one could catch Yunfeng, and the Windblade unleashed by his top-tier Windblade talent could have cut down most of them in an instant, Ye Tian thought grimly. Among the 20-odd Helian family members, there were a few genuinely strong fighters. Helianby, for example, was formidable in his own right, possessing 3 special talents: intermediate perception, primary speed, and advanced earth spear. In raw strength, he was the only one who could be compared to Yunfeng, and even then he ranked just beneath Yunfeng's prodigious combat skill. Ye Tian gave the skirmish a single, disinterested glance and stopped watching. The result was already clear. He turned his focus back underground, extending his spatial perception to probe the Yuanqi stone vein. Suddenly, a huge, savage beast appeared in his perception, located 420 meters below the surface, squarely within the range of his replicator talent. Species: ground pangolin. Bloodline talent: top defense, talent, medium agility, talent, medium strength, talent, medium. This thing is formidable, Ye Tian muttered. It actually has 3 special talents, and one of them is Earth Burrow. If a fight goes underground, even a martial artist who's much stronger might not be able to beat it. Only then did Ye Tian understand why Helianby had left the Yuanqi stones alone for 10 years inside the secret realm. He simply couldn't overcome this pangolin. The armored creatures were clearly guarding the entrance to the underground, the very tunnel they themselves had dug. If Ye Tian tried to dig a new tunnel to get in, it would take too long and cause too much disturbance. The noise and movement would definitely alert the Guardians. Teleportation wasn't a viable option either. His teleportation could only take him to places he could perceive directly, and materializing at the entrance would make him just as obvious. He certainly couldn't teleport straight through the thick earth. Only someone with a far more advanced spatial talent could attempt that. Ye Tian paced, considering every angle, but he still couldn't find a safe way in. Ye Tian gave Xiaozi's tiny purple rump a playful pat. Xiaozi, do you know any other way into the Yuanqi stone vein? Rogue Master. Xiaozi snorted in mock outrage, then obediently explained. I do know another route, an underground tunnel the pangolin dug. It doesn't stay down there all the time. It comes out sometimes to hunt other fierce beasts and replenish its energy. Otherwise it'd be too weak. I just happened to find that tunnel. Ye Tian guessed why. Xiaozi must have been drawn to the Yuanqi stone and had deliberately looked for another entrance. Being far weaker than an earth pangolin, it couldn't have dug the tunnel itself. It had simply found one the pangolin had made. Where is it? He asked. Xiaozi pointed off into the distance. Once Ye Tian understood the direction, he teleported away. His normal one-step teleport carried him 1,000 meters. With a space imprint, he could cover 2,000 meters in a single leap. They were already well beyond the 1,000-meter spiritual sensing range of the other martial artists. Combined with Ye Tian's constant teleportation, so fast that it left no trail, no one could detect them. It didn't take long before Ye Tian arrived at the spot Xiaozi had pointed out, a small, unremarkable lake. Master, there's a passage under this lake that opens into an underground chamber, Xiaozi said. From that chamber, you can get into the tunnels burrowed by the pangolins down below. Ye Tian had already suspected as much even before Xiaozi spoke. He nodded. Those pangolins really can dig. Their tunnels all collapse into the lake. If you didn't tell me, even with my spatial perception, it would be hard to find this entrance by probing slowly. He took Xiaozi with him and slipped into the water. They followed a narrow submerged passage and emerged in a small underground cavity. From there, dozens of tunnels branched off, twisting like an underground labyrinth. To others, the maze might have been maddening, but Ye Tian's spatial perception rendered it meaningless. He could sense the layout at a glance. "Lead on," he said. Xiaozi went ahead, and together they moved deeper into the tunnel system, closing in on the Yuanqi stone vein. The Yuanqi concentration spiked. Ye Tian felt it immediately, a surge of vital energy that meant a vein of Yuanqi stones was close. He moved down a narrow passage and pressed his palm to the stone wall. Embedded there, gleaming white and humming with power, was a Yuanqi stone. "How much Yuanqi must this contain?" he murmured. The stone radiated an almost intoxicating richness. He worked carefully. Afraid of attracting any ferocious beast that might be drawn to the disturbance, he made no noise. The rock here was unusually hard. The constant nourishment of Yuanqi had altered the strata so that ordinary people couldn't even chip off a flake. Still, Ye Tian's hands were steady. With a soft click, he pried the first stone free and slipped it into his portable space. He kept searching. Before long, he had found about 10 stones, each one sieved from the wall and stored away. His spatial sense pinged him a moment later. The battle above was almost over. The cloud wind tore through them like a merciless blade. One by one, members of the Helian family fell, unable to stop the storm that swept their ranks. By the time the wind died down, more than a dozen Helian warriors lay dead. Ye Tian watched with a small, dangerous smile. If the entire Helian family were wiped out, he thought, Yunfeng would never willingly give up the Yuanqi stone vein. Yunfeng would cling to control of the vein, busying himself with whatever he could, pinning down the little pangolin on the ground, defending the claim, while Ye Tian quietly took advantage of the chaos to dig up the stones unnoticed. He could have made a different choice. He could have finished off the remaining Helion members himself, even Yunfeng, and claimed the vein outright. But he didn't. Intentionally slaughtering people violated one of his personal rules. He wouldn't cross that line. Careful and patient, Ye Tian pried the Yuanqi stones from the earth, counting each one as he worked, 11, 12, 13, until he reached 20. He managed to extract them one by one without drawing the attention of the surviving fighters or the wild beasts prowling nearby. Only Xiaozi, the little pangolin on the ground, seemed aware of him. Yunfeng was slightly wounded, but not fatally. The Helian family's great warriors still had tricks and hidden weapons. It was unrealistic to expect to take them down without suffering injury in return. Ye Tian left the battlefield with his haul intact, the stones tucked away for now, and the knowledge that he had chosen restraint over ruthless gain. Because their speed was only average, the Helians had no chance of getting away. 10 minutes later, when the dust settled, only one figure remained on the field. Helian Wall. Chapter 82. Haha, I didn't expect to be outmatched. Your speed talent has reached mid-level. I won't accept this. Helion B spat blood and laughed bitterly. Die! Before he could finish, Yunfeng flicked his hand. A razor-sharp wind blade shot forward and pierced Helion B's chest, cutting off any chance of another word. The blow killed the grievously wounded Helion B instantly. Yunfeng let out a relieved laugh. Good thing I found that wind spirit grass and raised my speed to mid-level. Otherwise, I'd have been swarmed by those great warriors. I might have been crippled, if not killed. He quickly set to looting the fallen. There were many storage bags, but Helion B's stood out, heavy with treasure, its contents clearly valuable. Yunfeng had always been a collateral member of the Yun family, a talented prodigy, but not one who'd received abundant support. His cultivation resources had largely depended on his own efforts. Finding such spoils was therefore a major boon. Yunfeng's talent for cultivation was extraordinary. He was already regarded as the top prodigy at the Demon Sea Grand Base, and with the cache of resources he'd secured, there was no real worry about his future progress. What excited him most now, though, was the Yuanqi stone vein. Those veins were worth a small fortune. If he could kill the guardian beast, the entire vein would be his. The Yuanqi stones themselves were the true prize. But first, he needed to heal. The stones wouldn't run away, and if he recovered from his wounds, he could face the beast at full strength. It took him about half an hour to mend his injuries and restore his yuan qi and physical power. When he was finished, he felt at his peak again. With a rumble, he stepped into the entrance tunnel and descended into the underground cavern where the fight would inevitably take place. Unbeknownst to him, while Yunfeng had been battling the Earth Pangolin, Ye Tian had already managed to mine 200 yuan qi stones. He chuckled to himself as he worked. "Heh, you go and fight. By the time you're done, most of the yuan qi stones will have fallen into my hands." From his spatial sense and a quick sweep of the area, Ye Tian knew the vein had been heavily picked over. The ground pangolin had eaten most of the yuan qi stones, and the seam itself was small to begin with. All told, the whole vein today held only about 3,000 stones, a far cry from what it had contained 10 years ago, but still an unimaginable fortune to Ye Tian. Yunfeng and the ground pangolin were locked in a noisy fight nearby. Their clash covered a lot of sound, so as long as Ye Tian kept his movements small, he could dig quickly without drawing attention. "Xiaozi, don't slack off. Help me dig," Ye Tian ordered. "Master, I'll dig my hardest," Xiaozi replied, nodding eagerly. It loved nothing more than unearthing treasure. Before, with the pangolin around it, had been too scared to approach the vein, but with its master backing it up now, it felt brave enough to come in and dig. Ye Tian and the beast tore into the yuan qi stone vein like mad. For an ordinary digger, finding even a single usable yuan qi stone would have taken ages. Most of the rock was worthless waste. But Ye Tian's spatial perception ability let him sense the stones through the strata and pinpoint their locations. He moved with astonishing speed, only prying out the ones that were easy to reach rather than wasting time on deeply buried deposits. 300, 400, 500. The pile grew almost before anyone's eyes. Yunfeng scowled as he battled the creature. "Damn it, its defenses are sky high. My top windblade talent can't finish it in one strike unless I hit a weak point." Worse, the beast kept vanishing with that earth escape technique, slipping away and making it impossible to land a killing blow. Giving up wasn't an option. Yunfeng had already been marked. Sneaking off to mine the vein in secret wasn't feasible. If he wanted those yuan qi stones, he had to kill the beast. Yunfeng thought to himself, "I hurt. It should be angry. If I can draw it out completely, there's more room above ground, and my windblade technique will be far more effective." He set about luring the earth-walking pangolin out. That played right into Ye Tian's hands. Ye Tian had been anxious about being discovered, so he'd been digging for the yuan qi stone well away from the creature. With the pangolin pulled to the surface, Ye Tian grew bolder. 600, 700, 800 blocks. He dug faster and faster. The rumble of his work grew louder and finally carried to the surface. Fighting the pangolin above, Yunfeng heard a faint voice from below. Someone calling, "Is there movement down there?" He didn't dwell on it. Pangolins didn't prize yuan qi stone. It couldn't make them stronger. To the animal, the stones were nothing more than snacks. Eating more wouldn't interest it. What mattered now was who had wounded it. The pangolin's only real anger was aimed at Yunfeng. It hated Cloud Wind above all because he had hurt it. Even though it sensed that something had tunneled in from below, the creature still insisted on trying to be the first to kill Yunfeng. It was thick-skulled and stubborn, far less clever than Xiaozi or Xiaojin. If it had been smarter, Ye Tian never would have been able to dig up the yuan qi stones so easily. The sounds from beneath grew louder. Yunfeng could even make out the scrape of digging. Someone's trying to unearth the yuan qi stone, he realized, and anxiety flared. He needed a trump. A bead materialized in his hand. It was no ordinary bead, but an array bead, finely carved with a miniature formation, the phantom array. Magic beads like this were priceless. When unleashed, they could project a small illusory array, but the bead was consumed in the process, a single-use treasure. Such devices rarely fooled seasoned warriors, but a low-intelligence beast could be easily disoriented. Yunfeng activated the bead, pouring in his energy. The soil trembled as the phantom array formed. Rumble! The bead formation flared to life, its phantom power radiating outward and instantly ensnaring the pangolin that had just broken the surface. Trapped inside the illusory array, the creature paused, convinced it had wounded Yunfeng, and savoring the thought for a heartbeat too long. Seizing the opening, Yunfeng unleashed a wind blade that stabbed through the pangolin's eyes and drove straight into its brain. The skull caved, the beast's consciousness dissolved, and in the next instant it lay dead. Yunfeng watched the bead formation wink out and felt a flicker of regret. He'd burned a valuable card, but there was no time to dwell on it. He hurried down the tunnel. Far below, in another passageway, Ye Tian peered upward and let out a helpless sigh. "I can't dig anymore," he muttered. "I didn't expect Yunfeng to have that kind of trump. He finished the pangolin so fast. Still, we're almost there," he told himself. "I've dug up nearly 1,800 Yuanqi stones, and Xiaozi has dug a lot as well." Although plenty of Yuanqi stones remained, they lay deep inside the rock. Yunfeng suspected many had already been mined out. "Move!" Ye Tian shouted. He sprang up and hustled off, urging Xiaozi to hurry. The man and the beast hurried through the underground passage, crossed the subterranean lake, and made their way out. Far above, Yunfeng had no idea that down below a man and a beast had already dug up a large number of Yuanqi stones. Chapter 83. A few dozen miles out, Ye Tian and Xiaozi came to a stop. It was time for Xiaozi to hand over the Yuanqi stones. "Xiaozi, how many Yuanqi stones did you get?" Ye Tian asked. Xiaozi hesitated for a moment, then opened her mouth and reluctantly spat out a small storage pouch, the temporary bag Ye Tian had lent her to hold the stones. Ye Tian untied it and poured the contents out, then counted carefully. 412 Yuanqi stones. "Not bad," he said approvingly. Considering Xiaozi's limited strength and how hard the rock layer had been to break, Ye Tian's praise was sincere. Digging up 412 stones in such a short time had not been easy. "You did well. When I go back this time, I'll empty out the pouch and leave it to you," Ye Tian promised. "Master, really?" Xiaozi asked, trembling, not with fear, but with excitement. She had never seen a storage bag before. The idea of being able to tuck treasures away safely and carry them easily thrilled her. In the past, even when she found valuable things, she couldn't take them because she couldn't carry that many. Now, with a bag like this, everything would be so much easier. Xiaozi was over the moon that his master planned to reward him with a storage bag. "Master, I'll work hard and find more treasures," he promised eagerly. Ye Tian smiled slightly. That was exactly what he wanted. Let Xiaozi do the treasure hunting in the secret realm. Once he came out, he could copy Xiaozi's ability for himself and no longer need the little beast. Of course, he wouldn't simply abandon Xiaozi. He would give him to his sister Ye Yu. She would surely love him. "Go on, let's keep looking for treasure," Ye Tian urged. Master, there's a treasure over there. Let's grab it," Xiaozi cried, suddenly like a mischievous female bandit as he excitedly led Ye Tian toward the prize. At the same time, when Yunfeng entered the Yuanqi stone vein, he froze. The tunnel walls were riddled with small holes, and the fresh marks showed someone had been mining here recently. It looked as if a large number of Yuanqi stones had already been taken. "Who stole my Yuanqi stone?" Yunfeng's temper flared. He'd been fighting here. He hadn't expected someone to sneak in and steal a Yuanqi stone while he wasn't looking. The thought made him sick with irritation. Then he remembered the other spoils he'd already claimed from Helion B and the others, and his mood brightened a little. At worst, he'd lost only one stone. The thief must have fled. When he searched the area, there was no one, and the sound of digging had stopped. No one could have unearthed many of the stones in so short a time. Most of them should still be his. So he got back to work. There wasn't much time left. The exit from the secret realm would open in 7 or 8 days, and he needed at least 2 days to prepare and move, which left him only 5 or 6 days to actually mine. He had to get as many stones as he could in that window. If he lingered, he risked ending up trapped here for years like Helion B had. There was no way he'd let that happen. He dug and dug, working as fast as he could, but each Yuanqi stone took time to free. The ground was unstable from his frantic efforts. The rock layers had been shattered, and several shafts collapsed under him. Frustration and urgency battled in his chest as he pried and hammered, aware that every minute counted. Yunfeng had been mining for 5 straight days, no breaks, no sleep beyond snatched naps. Dust and wind clung to him. His face was gaunt, and his clothes were plastered to his skin. Still, his eyes burned with disappointment. "Damn it," he muttered. 5 days, and only 500 yuan chi stones. The rumors had always been grand. Small veins could yield 10,000 stones, and the rich ones, if they existed, might hold hundreds of thousands. There was even a recorded case of a newly born vein that had produced 10,000 pieces. How could Yunfeng's haul be so tiny by comparison? The difference between 10,000 and 500 felt absurd. He scowled, thinking back. That little thief earlier couldn't have taken more than 100 in the time he had, surely not enough to account for such a shortfall. Maybe some of the vein lay deeper, harder to reach. Even so, by his reckoning, the whole vein couldn't contain much more than 1,000 yuan chi stones in total. Yunfeng rubbed his sore hands and looked at the dim tunnel ahead. He had to decide whether to keep digging deeper or cut his losses and leave. The estimate he'd made kept rolling around in his head, roughly 1,000 stones at most. 1,000 yuanqi stones were far too few, not what one would expect from a true yuanqi stone vein. Yunfeng could only suppose a fierce beast had eaten a large number of them. It was the only explanation that made sense. If he learned that Ye Tian had secretly taken more than 2,000 yuanqi stones, he would be furious. So Yunfeng didn't continue mining. He abandoned the pit and hurried toward the space rift. Ye Tian didn't go off with Xiaozi to search for more treasures either. He, too, raced for the rift. Over the past few days, his haul had become comparable to the yield of the yuanqi stone vein itself. With Xiaozi guiding him and the secret realm's naturally abundant environment, Ye Tian's speed at collecting treasures was uncanny. In that short time, he had already gathered over 1,000 medicinal herbs, representing some 50 different plants, and more than 1,000 pieces of century-old materia medica. He had also come across 3 items that could enhance a cultivator's innate talent, and an ice spirit grass capable of boosting water or ice-affiliated aptitude. That last find was perfect for Yeyu, whose natural talent lay in cold ice cultivation. Satisfied, Ye Tian thought, certain that out of all the martial artists who had entered the secret realm this time, no one had come away with more than he had, not even Yunfeng, whose luck was rumored to be explosive. Spatial rifts opened and warriors spilled out. Many of them didn't have storage bags. Instead, they slung large sacks over their shoulders, very conspicuous. There were so many fighters around that no one dared to rob or attack. Trouble would only follow once they were back in the outside world. Ye Tian rushed toward one of the rifts and leapt through. On the other side, Yuling's voice called out, "Ye Tian, over here!" He hurried to the Yue family's royal wind boat and climbed aboard. "How was your haul?" she asked, curious. "Pretty good," Ye Tian replied with a nod. Yuling's gaze fell on the small creature curled against his chest. Her eyes widened. Could that be a purple golden rat? Ye Tian smiled and answered simply, "Yes." Yuling knew a lot, so it was no surprise that he recognized a purple gold treasure rat at a glance. He wasn't shocked at all. "Ye Tian," he said, eyes bright with envy, "do you know how valuable a purple gold treasure rat is? You actually caught one." "How valuable?" Ye Tian asked, curious. "Worth at least 100 billion, Yuling replied. "And don't forget, there's practically no market for them because they're so rare. A purple gold treasure rat makes treasure hunting so much easier. If yours has eaten items that enhance bloodline talent and its blood vein is at least high level, then it could be worth 200 billion or more. Will you sell it to me?" Yuling's words made his heart race. The little rat, Xiaozi, overheard them and trembled. In a small panicked voice it begged, "Master, don't sell Xiaozi." Chapter 84. Ye Tian gave Xiaozi a reassuring pat and said, "Don't worry." He turned to Yuling. "Sorry, but it's already taken a master." Yuling only smiled. "A creature's bond can be broken. My Yue family has a way to sever that tie. If you're willing to sell, it won't be a problem." She was clearly still trying to buy Xiaozi. Ye Tian shook his head. "Not for sale." She'd offered 200 billion, a ridiculous sum by ordinary standards, but Ye Tian scoffed. For one thing, the treasure Xiaozi had helped him find in the secret realm alone was worth far more. A single yuanqi stone was valued at 1 billion. With 2,200 stones, the total came to 2,200 billion. 200 billion was only a sliver compared to that. For Ye Tian, 200 billion meant nothing, and that was besides the fact he didn't think Xiaozi was worth such a bargain. Xiaozi's treasure hunting talent was extraordinary. Whereas an average purple gold treasure rat might only have a primary or at best a medium treasure hunting aptitude, a purple gold with primary talent and an elite bloodline could be worth on the order of hundreds of billions. With a high-level treasure hunting aptitude combined with a top lineage, like Xiaozi's, its value was essentially beyond calculation. Yueling had considered buying Xiaozi, but as soon as she realized Ye Tian had no intention of selling, she dropped the idea. Ye Tian, don't be careless, she warned. The purple gold treasure rat isn't cheap. Inside the Demon Sea Grand base, maybe no one would dare try to steal it, but once you leave the base, there could be all kinds of people who'd attack you for it. I know, Ye Tian nodded calmly. He wasn't worried at all. This time he'd come away with an enormous haul of treasures, which meant he couldn't leave the Demon Sea Grand base in a hurry. Given enough time to cultivate with what he'd found, his power growth would dwarf anyone's expectations. The moment he finally left, those who had been secretly hoping to rob Xiaozi would be the ones left despairing. Master, you're so good for not selling Xiaozi. Xiaozi will definitely try to earn you 200 billion yuan in the future. Simple, Xiaozi understood only that 200 billion was a huge number. He had no real sense of its value and didn't realize the treasures he'd found were worth far more than that. If he had known, he would have shot Yueling a comically large side-eye. 200 billion to buy Xiaozi? I'm not that cheap. The Yue family's great warriors returned one by one, but as the space crack was about to close, only 6 of them had made it back, 7, including Yueling. Most of the Yue family's great warriors had been lost. Ye Tian Dark Road. Fortunately, the Yue family's other prodigy had survived. The overall loss, though severe, was not total. In midair, the rent in the void hovered and began to contract, and it closed with terrifying speed. Not even the Yunhei king could stop it. He might have bought another month by risking his life, but he wasn't willing to pay that price. 1,000 went in, and fewer than 300 came out. Yueling couldn't help the bitter sigh that escaped her. Ye Tian said nothing, but he felt the full cruelty of a secret realm expedition keenly in his bones. If it hadn't been for his top-tier healing gift and his teleportation, and despite his reckless scramble for treasure, he would almost certainly have died under the beast's onslaught. The fact that he'd survived at all was a grim reminder of how precarious the others' situations had been. If the warriors back at Linhai Base found out that more than 700 had fallen on a single trip to the secret realm, they would be speechless. If he hadn't seen it with his own eyes at the Demon Sea Grand Base, he would never have believed that more than 700 great martial artists could fall. In a small coastal outpost, the death of a senior warrior would be a major shock. Every loss is a headline. But at the Demon Sea Grand Base, it was different. The great warriors seemed almost expendable. After one wave of sea, casualties, another group of elites would simply be promoted to replace them, and the loss barely rippled the surface. Yue Ben watched the spatial rift seal itself completely and decided there was no point in waiting any longer. Even if the Yue family's men inside had survived, there was no way to get them out now. They would be trapped until the rift reopened, perhaps 10 years from now. With a dismal rumble, the royal windboat rose into the air and set course for the Demon Sea Grand Base. One by one, the other clan's windships lifted off as well. Before long, the vast mountains were deserted by people, and the feral beasts slunk back in to reclaim the territory. The Yu family's ship banked and descended. When it touched down, Ye Tian staggered out and fell to the ground. Ye Tian, the treasures you got in the secret realm are yours to keep, but if there are any you don't need, you can trade them at the Wu Pavilion, okay? Yes, Ye Tian said. He had planned to trade some of the items anyway. He had so many that both his personal storage and 2 extra satchels were full. Come on, I'll take you to the Wu Pavilion. Yueling led him away from the Yue family compound toward the nearby branch. Before long they arrived. Ye Tian stopped and stared. This pavilion is huge. The Wu Pavilion was an imposing, ancient-style building, easily 50 meters tall. Ye Tian couldn't help feeling impressed. By comparison, the Wuge branch at the Linhai base was rather modest. There are 10 branches like this across the Demon Sea Grand Base. Yueling explained as they approached the entrance. And the main hall at Wuge headquarters is even grander, about 100 meters high. Inside the pavilion, Yueling personally set up the trade. He escorted Ye Tian to a counter where a seasoned appraiser took over. The old master carefully examined each of Ye Tian's treasures, appraising and placing values on them. "Young master, please, show me the treasures." The appraisal master practically trembled with excitement. Ye Tian opened the storage bag and began taking items out one by one. In a short while, the appraisal table was buried under a glittering heap of objects. Yueling stared, disbelief making her eyes go wide. There were far too many treasures to be real. Then she understood, with a purple gold treasure rat in the secret realm's natural treasure house environment, pets like that could yield countless heavenly treasures. Once you had such a creature in that setting, finding valuable items wasn't so difficult. "Young master, do all of these really have to be traded to our Wu Ge?" the appraiser asked, voice barely containing his eagerness. It was the largest consignment he'd seen in decades, and he could hardly hide how thrilled he was. Ye Tian answered calmly, "Yes, all of them." Despite the impressive pile, it was only about a tenth of his actual holdings, and mostly middling pieces at that. He had deliberately left the best treasures out of sight. Because the treasure was so valuable, Yueling summoned several appraisal experts and even arranged for a senior supervisor from Wu Ge to come and personally evaluate the items for Ye Tian. Half a day later, the Wu Ge representative spoke up. "Young Master Ye Tian, the total value of these items is 321.4 billion. Wu Ge will purchase them for 325 billion and will issue you a VIP card. Future purchases at Wu Ge will be at 95% of the regular price. How does that sound?" "Yes, 325 billion is fine," Ye Tian said, nodding with evident satisfaction. Chapter 85. After leaving the Wukaku branch, Yueling's bright eyes fixed on Ye Tian. "Ye Tian, you're a real local tycoon now. 325 billion. I'm half tempted to rob you." "You'd better first get stronger if you want to try that," Ye Tian teased. "You're daring to tease me already." Yueling pretended to be offended. They laughed together, then lingered for a moment before heading off. "By the way," Yueling said as they walked, "there's an auction run by Wu Ge in 10 days. You should go. There'll be lots of things there that you need. Since you haven't joined any faction, many items can only be bought outright." "What sort of things?" Ye Tian asked, curious. He had money now, but he knew that some rare items weren't traded openly, like the storage bag he'd casually inquired about at Wu Ge and been told wasn't for sale. Yueling's voice dropped a little. "An advanced Yuanli forging body secret technique." "Really? They'd actually auction that?" Ye Tian's interest was immediate. He had only been at the Demon Sea Grand Base a short while, and of course he'd already asked around about the advanced Yuanli forging body secret technique. But that was the core secret of the major powers. It wasn't something that could be bought or traded. Unless he swore allegiance to one of those great forces and joined their ranks, he had no way of obtaining a high-level Yuanli technique. All he had now was the intermediate Yuanli forging body method Yueling had given him. It worked very well at his current level, but once he reached the Grandmaster realm, its effects would flatten out. There would be no further amplification. Beyond that point, advancement depended on drinking the blood of top-tier ferocious beasts. The difference in speed between someone who possessed a high-level Yuanli secret technique and someone who didn't was enormous. Ye Tian had planned that once he reached the Sectmaster realm, he'd start looking for a high-level Yuanli forging body secret technique. Now, unexpectedly, an opportunity had presented itself. "Yueling, I'll definitely go," he said. "I'll get you an invitation to the auction within 2 days," Yueling promised. "Then you can go straight there." "Thank you," Ye Tian replied sincerely. If he'd tried to secure the invitation himself, it would have cost him a lot of time. With that settled, the two of them parted ways. By the time Ye Tian got home, it was late afternoon. Ye Yu had already come back from the martial arts school, and the moment she saw him, she jumped up excitedly. "Brother, you're finally back!" She ran over, but immediately froze in delight when she noticed Xiaozi. "Wow, what a cute little mouse! Brother, is this the present you bought me?" Her eyes sparkled. It was hard to blame her. Xiaozi really was adorable. The small tuft of golden fur between its brows somehow gave it an air of refinement that made it irresistibly charming. "Yes," Ye Tian said with a nod. "This is for you." When Ye Tian handed Xiaozi over to his sister, Ye Yu, the little creature was bewildered. What was going on? Who was this woman? I belonged to my master. Why was she taking me? Xiaozi sent the question into Ye Tian's mind. "Master, did you sell me?" Ye Tian replied gently, also mentally. "I didn't sell you. I'm just busy and don't have time to look after you right now. This is my sister Ye Yu. You'll be living with her from now on. She likes you a lot and won't treat you badly." "If I'm not sold, then I'll listen to you, master," Xiaozi answered obediently. With Xiaozi's arrival, Xiaojin's status in the household plummeted almost overnight. Yeyu had played with Xiaojin often, but now she doted on the new pet. Yeyu was busy with her cultivation practice and couldn't spend time entertaining both animals, so Xiaojin was increasingly ignored. Left to their own devices, the two pets quickly began talking to each other. "I'm Xiaozi. What's your name?" the newcomer asked. "My name's Xiaojin," came the reply. "It's the name the owner gave me." "What skills do you have?" Xiaozi pressed. Xiaojin puffed up a little. "I'm very fast, and I've got great stamina." Xiaozi surveyed him with a small, amused smile. That doesn't sound very impressive. Do you want to know what I can do? I have an eye for treasure. Nothing can escape me. If you were my little brother, I'd take you hunting for riches all the time." Xiaozi crowed. "Hello, big brother." Xiaojin answered cheerfully. "No, call me big sister. I'm the elder here," Xiaozi corrected, striking an authoritative pose. "All right, big sister." Xiaojin agreed without hesitation. With only a few playful words, Xiaozi had adopted Xiaojin as her little brother. Then, instead of walking, she climbed up onto his enormous back and rode him like a mount. Ye Tian watched them and couldn't help laughing for days at the ridiculous tableau. Since Xiaojin, Xiaozi, and Ye Yu were happily amusing themselves, Ye Tian didn't bother to interfere. On the fourth day after they returned, someone from Yuling arrived with an invitation, an invite to an upcoming auction. Ye Tian tucked it away and prepared to cultivate when he suddenly remembered that his copy talent cooldown had just ended. First, copy Xiaozi's treasure hunting talent, he decided. He couldn't pass that up. He activated his ability. Copy, fusion. The advanced treasure hunting skill proved deceptively easy to integrate. Ye Tian only felt a brief flush of heat and a light sweat as the talent folded into him. 10 minutes later, the fusion completed. Treasure hunting talent. Advanced Ye Tian was delighted by the new talent line and wasted no time testing its power. He set 3 items on the table: 100-year-old ginseng, 1,000-year-old Heishou Wu, and a Yuanqi stone, then activated the treasure hunting talent. An extraordinary sight unfolded. 3 distinct clusters of light rose from the objects. The century ginseng gave off a faint, pale white glow. The 1,000-year Heishou Wu emitted a fuller, denser white light. The Yuanqi stone shone with a soft red radiance. Encouraged, Ye Tian pulled out more of his treasures and inspected them one by one. A pattern quickly emerged. The color of the light corresponded to the treasure's rank. From lowest to highest, the levels were white, red, and yellow. Most of his items glowed white. A few registered as red, and the rare yellow lights marked true heavenly treasures, items like the heavenly soul flower. Ye Tian still didn't know what lay beyond the yellow light. To get a better handle on his treasure-seeking talent, he tested its range and found it extended 10 miles. Within that radius, he could sense the presence of treasures and make a rough judgment of their grade. Using the talent, he detected a cluster of treasure lights within 10 miles. Unfortunately, they all belonged to the Lord and were off-limits. The best of them was only a yellow light anyway. There might be a chance to duplicate an extraordinary grade cultivation talent, Ye Tian muttered to himself. From what he understood, the highest known talent in the Demon Sea Great Base was an extraordinary grade cultivation talent. He couldn't directly copy a talent into something of a higher tier. His only realistic option was to collect several extraordinary grade talents and attempt to fuse them into a higher level talent. It wasn't ideal, but it was a plan. First, I'll go check around Yun's place, he decided, and slipped out quietly. Chapter 86. The Yun family compound sprawled for miles in every direction, a densely built little city of high rises and gated courtyards. a kingdom in miniature. Its population was enormous. Between the main branch and the major collateral lines, there were nearly 100,000 people. It was the undisputed premier clan of the Demon Sea Grand Base, its power and wealth visible in every shining tower and guarded gate. Ye Tian wandered through the outer districts with a specific hope. His copying talent, a passive ability that let him unconsciously duplicate another person's extraordinary level cultivation aptitude, had a radius of 500 meters. If someone with such a rare aptitude came within that range, he could steal it without realizing. He had come to the Yun estate precisely because he trusted that a clan this large would harbor several superlative cultivators inside. But his optimism evaporated quickly. There were no signs of extraordinary level talent in the areas he could access. The truly gifted members of the Yun family were hidden deep within the compound, behind inner gates, private towers, and layers of protection. Unless he could get inside those inner wards or wait for those elite martial artists to leave on their own, there was no way for him to get close enough to copy anything. Frustrated, Ye Tian abandoned the Yun estate and continued his search elsewhere, but the rest of the day brought only dead ends. Every promising lead fizzled out. The extraordinary talents remained out of reach. Even with a detection range of 500 meters, there was no way to reproduce whatever he'd seen without finding the person responsible. Ye Tian had no choice but to pin his hopes on the upcoming auction. In a few days, an auction would be held, a perfect place, he thought, to encounter an extraordinary level cultivator. The day came sooner than he expected. The auction Woog was holding this time wasn't especially large, the sort of regular sale they ran every month or two, but it was being conducted at Wuji headquarters, and that ensured a steady turnout. Early that morning, Ye Tian set out and hurried to the compound. He stopped at the gates and felt his breath catch. The Wuji headquarters rose 100 meters into the sky, a solemn block of stone and banners. The whole compound exuded authority. Soldiers were posted at every entrance, most of them seasoned great warriors, and in the raised pavilions he could see masters already seated in attendance. If the outside security was this formidable, the forces within the compound must be even more imposing, perhaps even a king-level cultivator presiding inside. Wuj was controlled by three great families. The Yue family ranked among the weaker of them. Still, Wuji maintained seats for king-level patrons, so it wasn't surprising to find king-level figures present at their auctions. Ye Tian looked up at the headquarters, trying to steady his nerves. If anyone extraordinary was going to appear, this was the place to find them. The headquarters of the Wu Pavilion was a place where even nobles tread carefully. Ye Tian presented his invitation at the front desk and was escorted up to the 5th floor by a female attendant. The auction was held there. The scene was different from what he'd expected. There were no private rooms, just one vast hall with rows of seats. The spacing between them was generous, so it didn't feel cramped. The room could probably hold around 1,000 people, though it looked like far fewer had shown up. Ye Tian took his place, and without hesitation, activated his copying talent. The ability spread silently through the hall, sweeping over every person present. One by one, everyone's talent signatures revealed themselves. Murmurs ran through the crowd. Great talent. Very high level. Ye Tian's expression darkened. Those who could attend this auction weren't ordinary. None of the talent readings were weak. At worst, they were high-level cultivators. Many were top-tier practitioners. This would not be an easy gathering. Ye Tian still hadn't seen the extraordinary grade cultivation talent he was hoping for. He stretched the range of his replica talent outward. The ability's sensing field kept widening until it bathed the entire Wu headquarters. Then, on the 15th floor of the Wu Pavilion, the top level, something registered in his vision. Owner, Chang. Race, human. Constant cultivation talent. Extraordinary level gravity talent. Primary. An extraordinary level cultivation talent. From the aura, Ye Tian judged the owner to be roughly a king-tier powerhouse. The surname was Chang. Since the man didn't belong to any of Wuji's three great families, he was probably a commoner presenting an offering. Ye Tian didn't announce himself. He silently copied the talent into his own store of information. He refused to fuse it then. This was the auction hall, and a fusion could alter one's body in strange ways. It would be inappropriate, even dangerous, to undergo that here. He would wait until he was safely home to perform any merging. About half an hour later, the auction finally began. At first, the items up for auction weren't particularly priceless, but for great martial artists, they were enticing. There were cultivation aids that could speed up training 2 or even 3-fold. The drawback was that the effect was temporary, lasting at most 1 month. Even so, such items routinely fetched prices of $1 billion or $2 billion. Ye Tian, with untold treasures of his own, paid no attention to those ordinary pieces. He was waiting for the advanced Yuanli forging body secret technique. That secret technique hadn't yet appeared, and he was beginning to grow impatient when the next lot made him sit up. The next item is a king-level cultivation experience, originating from the Hurricane King, who fell in the beast tide 40 years ago. Starting bid, $5 billion, the auctioneer announced. The name Hurricane King carried weight. Even though he had fallen 40 years earlier, his legend was still widely known, the sort of name that drew a ripple of reaction through the crowd. A king-level cultivation experience was undeniably valuable, but its appeal was narrow. Few people could, or would, pay such a price for it. Cultivation depends on talent and resources. How useful could a purchased cultivation experience really be? For a novice, it could make all the difference. But most people in the auction hall were veterans, top elders, or core disciples of the great houses and sects. They had full access to their own scripture vaults and private repositories. King-level techniques were open to them whenever they wanted. Spending an obscene sum to buy someone else's experience would be a waste. Almost everyone ignored the lot. Only Ye Tian was genuinely interested. He had always been feeling his way forward in cultivation. Even the realm beyond Sectmaster was still vague to him. A king-level cultivation experience could be invaluable. $5.5 billion, a bidder called. $6 billion, $7 billion, $8 billion. The bids climbed in polite, measured steps. The competition never got fierce. A handful of people took turns pushing the price up and then dropped back. When someone finally called $10 billion, the room hushed for a moment. Ye Tian raised his placard without hesitation. $11 billion. The gavel came down, and a ripple of surprised, judgmental looks followed him. Many in the hall exchanged pitying smiles, thinking he'd overpaid, that Ye Tian had wasted a fortune on something he couldn't possibly need. But for Ye Tian, the price was worth it. This wasn't pocket change, it was real money. The celestial soul flower, a treasure that could boost innate talent, was listed at $10 billion. That was its official value, though in truth, no one had ever actually sold one. The auction pressed on. One rare item after another passed over the stage. There was even another talent-enhancing treasure, not one that improved cultivation across the board, but a specialty item for the fire element, the red yan lingxi. This red flame G, anoderma, only affected elementary flame talent and didn't guarantee a complete improvement, so its price stayed relatively modest at $12 billion. There really are a lot of incredible items here, things you can't buy anywhere else, someone murmured in the crowd. Ye Tian's expression darkened. After a long wait, the high-level Yuanli forging body secret technique he had been craving finally appeared on the auction block. The auctioneer's voice cut through the murmuring crowd. Up for bid, a high-level Yuanli forging body secret technique from a super base, the Zhonghai base, the purple blood forging body technique. As for provenance, there's no need to worry. Wuge guarantees its authenticity. He let the assurance hang in the air, then barked the price. Starting bid, $30 billion. Chapter 87. Only $30 billion? That's unbelievably cheap for this kind of thing, a veteran exclaimed in disbelief. Around the auction hall, the other cultivators couldn't hide their surprise. The reason there were so few great clans in the Demon Sea Grand Base was precisely because high-level Yuanli forging body secret techniques were jealously guarded. Intermediate Yuanli body techniques were common and often similar to one another, but the high-level secrets varied greatly. They were far more complicated, touching on many different aspects of cultivation and combat. One genuine high-level Yuanli forging body secret could turn a small family into a major power. Because of that, a starting bid of only $30 billion was shockingly low. Whispers spread through the crowd. Many people found it hard to believe the technique on the block could be genuine. The auctioneer saw the confusion spreading through the crowd and hurried to explain. Everyone, this high-level Yuanli body-forging secret technique is genuine, but it cannot be distributed freely. The method is engraved on an inheritance bead with a soul array embedded inside. Anyone who wants to learn it must swear an oath to practice it alone and never teach it, so its practical value is limited. The 30 billion starting price was set after discussion by the Woog. Is that how it is? Hearing that, many in the hall lost interest. A large number of the attendees represented the great forces. They already had channels to obtain advanced Yuanli body forging techniques. Even though those techniques came with the same vow against teaching, they could still acquire them without paying a fortune. The purple blood forging technique, with its enormous price tag, therefore didn't appeal to them. Independent practitioners like Ye Tian were another matter. They were visibly excited. Many of these lone fighters, some of them master level, fixed their eyes on the purple blood forging technique, eager for the chance to bid. It looks like the competition isn't small, Ye Tian thought, noticing the many eyes fixed on the same prize. Still, he was determined to get the purple blood forging technique. With his financial resources, he figured, ordinary masters simply couldn't compete with him. When he read the listing more carefully, his interest spiked. Purple blood forging technique, super base, Zhonghai super base. So there really was a level above the big bases. The idea of a super base fascinated him. He'd long wondered where the Yuanli forging body method and the advanced Yuanli forging body secrets had come from. At first he'd assumed the big base produced them, but after getting to the big base, he realized it didn't have that capability. Maybe those techniques originated at a super base. Unfortunately, his status wasn't high enough to learn more. All he could find out was the name, Zhonghai Super Base, and nothing beyond that. How big has Huaxia grown now? How many major bases are there? How many super bases? How big is the whole world, really? Questions crowded Ye Tian's mind, each one waiting for answers he could only find in the years to come. 35 billion, 38 billion, 40 billion. The calls kept coming. Everyone bidding on the purple blood forging technique was a sect master. Sect masters have many ways to make money and centuries to accumulate wealth. Sums ordinary great martial artists can't even imagine. Tens of billions was pocket change to them. On top of that, the purple blood forging technique was an advanced Yuanli forging body secret. Chances to obtain something like this were rare. Some masters, unwilling to bind themselves to the major powers, were determined not to let the opportunity slip away. 80 billion. The new bid slammed into the hall. Only a few hands remained raised now. The price had climbed to an astronomical level. Sect masters were indeed wealthy, but cultivation demanded enormous resources. Only the very top sects could afford assets on the order of 100 billion. And those top sects already possess the advanced Yuanli forging body secret technique. The sects now competing for it were ordinary by comparison. Their coffers couldn't stretch that far. When the bidding stalled at 80 billion, the other masters simply gave up. Then Ye Tian spoke, 100 billion. The announcement hit like a thunderclap. A stunned silence fell over the hall as dozens of cultivators turned to stare at him. He had just spent 11 billion on king-level cultivation experience. Now he'd dropped 100 billion on a high-level forging body technique. Jealous murmurs spread through the crowd. How rich is he? Someone whispered. Is he the son of some great family? It's possible to throw away more than 100 billion at will. He must be some royal scion, one master muttered with a sigh. I really envy those rich kids, born with limitless resources, while the rest of us have to fight for every step. If they knew Ye Tian's true identity, that he wasn't some pampered heir of a great family, they would have been stunned. 100 billion was no small sum. Several contenders glanced at one another and, seeing no point in continuing, quietly withdrew from the bidding. Ye Tian's high bid had won him the purple blood forging body technique, a top-tier Yuanli body forging secret technique, and with that, his reason for attending the auction was fulfilled. But the sale wasn't over. Although the purple blood forging technique was precious, it was not the auction's climax. Soon the real treasure was brought forward. Dragon's Blood Vine Essence, a rarity that can help a great martial artist break into the Grandmaster realm. Opening bid, 10 billion. The auctioneer's voice rang out. Immediately, dozens of martial artists fixed their gaze on the small vial of crimson liquid sitting on the table. Yellow tier treasure. Ye Tian blurted, activating his treasure-sensing ability. A faint yellow radiance pulsed from the small vial of dragon blood vine sap, and the ability confirmed his guess. This was a yellow-grade treasure. From the whispers around him, he picked up the rest. Dragon blood vine sap is the resin of the dragon blood vine, used to help great warriors refine their meridians. The Grandmaster realm is achieved through meridian refinement, so warriors who hope to break through to the Sectmaster realm often use this sap. For those with exceptional talent at lower levels, meridian refinement and entry into the Sectmaster realm can be comparatively easy. For high-level cultivators, however, the chance of success drops drastically. A failed refinement can severely damage the meridians. Even if they are repaired later, the foundation has been ruined, and reaching the Sectmaster level becomes a lifelong impossibility. That risk is the tragic dilemma faced by powerful cultivators. The dragon's blood vine juice was in a different league. It could raise the chance of a breakthrough by at least 30%, a literal godsend for heirs of high-level cultivators. In a room full of masters who didn't have such talented descendants, every one of them wanted that bottle. In this age, cultivation treasures were the most precious commodities. Secret manuals, weapons, or accumulated experience all paled beside items that could help someone break a bottleneck. No wonder their prices went through the roof. When the dragon's blood vine juice went under the hammer, it fetched an astonishing 60 billion yuan, sold to a grandmaster. One after another, similarly valuable treasures were put up and the auction house erupted into a feverish clamor. Bids flew, faces changed, fortunes shifted. It was chaos. Ye Tian didn't raise a hand. None of those items were of use to him. Then, suddenly, a new treasure was placed on the stage. Instantly, Ye Tian activated his treasure-hunting talent and probed for its nature, but his senses came up empty. It was obvious at a glance. Wu Ge had sealed the item against any external detection. A treasure-hunting talent isn't omnipotent. For example, if someone wanted to probe the vaults of Wu Ge, they couldn't wug. He has sealed off every conceivable method of probing. If they hadn't, Wu Ge's secrets would have been exposed long ago, and they'd have lost their edge in the trade. The auctioneer tapped the cloth covering the next lot. "This piece is unusual," he announced. "Even Wu Ge couldn't identify it. It was consigned to us by an outside party, so we have to auction it. Opening bid, 1 billion. A ripple of curiosity ran through the assembled warriors. Ye Tian felt a flicker of excitement, too. He couldn't help but wonder what lay under that cover. Chapter 88. What kind of treasure could be this mysterious? Someone murmured. The auctioneer lifted the cloth to reveal a tall box, almost as high as a man, its surface striped in neat, regular bands. He opened it, and inside sat a huge egg. It was entirely golden and pulsed as if it were alive. "A beast egg?" someone asked, skeptical. The crowd exchanged uneasy looks. It didn't feel right. A true ferocious beast's egg would give off a strong animal aura, but this one emitted nothing. The auctioneer continued. "That's the strangest part. There's no beast chi coming from it, yet it's definitely an egg. Even more remarkable, the shell is unbelievably tough. Not even a master-level fighter can break it, and a king-level cultivator's divine sight cannot penetrate to see what's inside." He shook his head. "If this item hadn't been consigned to us by an outside party, we'd have tried everything to open it. But since its origin can't be verified and no one knows how to incubate it, anyone buying it would be taking a serious risk." Even though the egg looked priceless, the auctioneer opened the bidding at only 1 billion. "Could it be the egg of some powerful creature?" someone called out. "If it hatches, it could be worth a fortune. Or maybe it's just an animated metal trinket with a hint of life," another shrugged. "If it won't hatch, it's just a fancy ornament." "No matter what it is, starting at 1 billion is a steal," someone else added. The room buzzed, and one by one the warriors began to raise their paddles. The price climbed quickly. Ye Tian kept staring at the egg, a growing dread in his eyes. As a treasure hunter, he could feel the object's aura, a a warm, golden radiance like a gift from the heavens. He couldn't shake the sense that this was far from ordinary. Use the replicating talent, he muttered to himself. If this really was a beast's egg, his talent for copying and scanning artifacts might reveal its nature and let him judge its origin. He didn't expect it to work, but he tried anyway. To his shock, a ribbon of information unspooled across his retina. It confirmed that the object was indeed an egg and gave it a grand, intimidating name. Species, Battle Blood Dragon. Bloodline, Talent. Don't. Strength Talent. Flying Talent. Speed Talent. Defense Talent. A row of question marks stared back at Ye Tian. He felt his jaw tighten. This was without doubt the most gifted creature he had ever come across. Not a beast, he corrected himself. A dragon. A legendary dragon egg, and some unknown buyers had actually dared to put it up for auction. Ye Tian scowled. He couldn't help but wonder, why were all the talent levels unreadable? At first he thought maybe they were simply too high for his talent copying ability to register. But the idea vanished almost as quickly as it had appeared. It was absurd to think every single listed talent would exceed his detection limit. If they truly did, what kind of being would this war-blood heavenly dragon have to be? Power so enormous it could raise mountains with a sneeze. He shook his head. That line of thinking led to nothing useful. The only reasonable explanation, he decided, was that the talent information had been deliberately concealed or sealed. Someone, perhaps the sellers, had hidden the dragon egg's true nature on purpose. The war-blood heavenly dragon egg wasn't fully formed yet. Its innate talent hadn't been fixed. Only when it hatched would its true aptitude become set. That was the rule all living things followed. You have to buy it, someone muttered nearby. A dragon like this has limitless potential, far beyond Xiao Jin or Xiao Zi the bull. I plan to give Xiao Jin and Xiao Zi to my sister as pets anyway. If I'm going to do that, I want something with unlimited potential for myself. And this dragon can fly. Just imagine how impressive it'll be to ride one. Ye Tian listened, studying the egg calmly. He didn't hurry to jump into the bidding. Dragon eggs always drove prices sky high. A few rich patrons wouldn't blink when the Count Rai atched 10 billion. The numbers climbed, 20 billion, 30, 40, 50. It was odd. The room was full of top-tier masters, yet the only person who didn't fit that caliber was Ye Tian himself, a great martial artist, sitting amid them. Finally, with a sharp voice that cut through the murmur, Ye Tian shouted, 80 billion! A few of the masters exchanged glances and frowned. They were calculating, weighing whether the egg was really worth that much. There were other treasures up for bid. The dragon egg wasn't the real prize. If too much was spent on the egg, the bidders wouldn't have enough left to go after the items they actually wanted later, and that would be a huge loss. Because of that, the other masters quietly backed off, and Ye Tian won the dragon egg without serious competition. He stayed out of the bidding for the remaining lots. It wasn't because he lacked the funds. Most of those items were only useful as cultivation aids. The final lot, however, was the real heavyweight, a relic said to increase a master's influence at the king level by a mere 0.5%. Even so, it hammered for 1,000 billion, a sum that stunned everyone present. When the auction ended, Ye Tian collected the egg, paid, and walked out. A few people outside Woog headquarters, curious about his identity, tailing him in secret. Ye Tian, however, had already sensed their presence through his spatial awareness. He led them into a deserted corner and then teleported away, easily shaking off his pursuers. Back home. Ye Tian took the treasure from the auction and opened it carefully. The most precious item had been the dragon egg, but examining it yielded nothing useful at the moment, so he set it aside to study later. What he focused on now was a different prize, a thick, heavy treatise bound in the tough hide of a top-tier ferocious beast. He flipped through it with growing interest. The manual traced a practitioner's path from the lowest martial stages all the way to the king level. Every realm was described in detail, with warnings about common pitfalls and a wealth of methods for accelerating cultivation or breaking through bottlenecks. What caught Ye Tian's attention most were the sections on attempting the Sectmaster realm and, beyond that, the king-level realm. The passage that made him linger read in essence, to attempt the Sectmaster breakthrough, one must first reach the limit of the great martial artist. The firmer the foundation, the higher the chance of success. If the foundation is shaky, then even with exceptional innate talent that brings one to the peak of a great martial artist, the probability of successfully pushing onward to sect master, and especially to the king level, will be significantly reduced. The extraordinary grade impact technique should guarantee a 100% success rate for foundation forging, the text read, but in reality, almost none of the extraordinary grade cultivators can form a perfect foundation. As a result, the actual success rate of the impact is only about 80%. Those with imperfect foundations will run into serious problems when they try to advance to the higher realms. Ye Tian stared at the lines, stunned. Even an extraordinary grade method couldn't ensure a flawless foundation? What kind of world was this? He kept reading until he found the passage that explained how a perfect foundation could be forged. To form a perfect foundation, the work must be done before reaching the Grandmaster realm. Once you cross into the Grandmaster realm, the embryo of the foundation is already set. If that embryo is imperfect, then it is impossible to forge a perfect foundation afterward. To cast a flawless foundation, one must push past the limits of skin, flesh, bones, and blood, and temper every internal organ. Push past the limits. Ye Tian repeated the phrase to himself. He'd never heard it used exactly like that before. Still, he wasn't the sort of person to dismiss an unfamiliar term out of hand, especially not when he was a king-rank Hurricane King. If such language was used here, it had to be grounded in something real. Ye Tian felt a surge of relief that he'd gained this crucial cultivation insight. If he hadn't, and had rushed into the sect master realm prematurely, his foundation would have been incomplete, and he would have regretted it for the rest of his life. Chapter 89. Break the Limit. How do you break it? Ye Tian frowned. He wanted to forge a flawless foundation himself, but the Hurricane King had already warned that even an exceptional cultivator would find that nearly impossible. At the Demon Sea Grand Base level, no one had ever broken the limit to form a perfect foundation. A super base might allow it, but if so, it was extraordinarily rare. Ye Tian read on. The Hurricane King then outlined several seemingly plausible methods. There are 2 ways to break the limit, the instructor said. The first is to use a variety of rare celestial treasures to force a breakthrough. But that method is prohibitively extravagant. Only the great powers at the king level even consider it, and they reserve those treasures for geniuses with flawless foundations. The second is to rely on talent. You use different talents to remodel the body. Skin tempering corresponds to defensive talent, flesh tempering to strength talent, bone tempering to bone talent, blood exchange to bloodline talent. The 5 viscera and 6 entrails are more complicated. It's hard to have direct talent equivalents, but you can use intense gravity to temper the delicate internal organs, intentionally breaking and reshaping them. During that process, precious restorative medicines must be used to preserve the patient's life. Ye Tian listened and felt a rush of excitement. For ordinary people, the first method might sometimes be possible, and the second almost impossible. No one could possess so many different talents. But Ye Tian was not ordinary. He had the talent of replication, the ability to copy others' talents. That made the second method achievable for him, while the first remained out of reach. The section went on to explain how talents could be used to shatter physiological limits. It gave a concrete example. 10 years ago, a prodigy with the top-level blood-burning aptitude was cultivating when his blood-burning talent awakened. In a short time, he broke through the cap on blood exchange and greatly increased the potency of his blood. From that case, the manual inferred that the same principle applied elsewhere. If someone had a top defensive aptitude and refined their skin after that aptitude awakened, they could likewise break the skin's natural limit. The other limits could be overcome by analogous methods. Reading that, Ye Tian finally understood. But he couldn't act on it yet. He didn't possess a top defensive aptitude, a top strength aptitude, a top bone aptitude, or a power bloodline, and those 4 weren't things he could simply create for himself. Without them, he couldn't hope to break the 4 caps: skin tempering, flesh, muscle tempering, bone refinement, and blood exchange, and attempting to force a breakthrough in the organs while the rest of the body remained weak would risk catastrophic collapse of his flesh. In short, he had to wait. Only after other aspects of the body had broken their limits, leaving the internal organs as the sole weak point, could he attempt to push the organ's limit, and even then it would have to be done under extreme high-gravity conditions to stand a chance. This made the most sense. In the future, he would have to replicate the top defense talent, the top strength talent, the top bone talent, and the top bloodline talent. Ye Tian decided on a plan. He could make 2 replications each month. With enough luck, he could reproduce those top-tier talents and lay a nearly perfect foundation within a year or 2. The most likely to come first was the top power talent. His power aptitude was already very high, and even if he couldn't find an existing top power talent, fusing 2 other high-power talents might produce one. Better to increase his strength first, then seek out the remaining talents. With that resolved, he took out the inheritance bead that contained the purple blood forging body technique. The purple blood forging body technique was a high-level Yuanli forging body method. Replacing his current intermediate Yuanli technique with it would significantly accelerate his cultivation. Ye Tian poured in his spiritual power, swore the necessary vow, and began to read. As he absorbed the contents, the inheritance bead shattered completely. Wait, so the purple blood forging technique isn't a single routine at all. It's a collection of methods divided by cultivation target. Ye Tian's surprise was genuine. The so-called purple blood forging was actually a family of techniques. There was the purple blood skin tempering, the purple blood flesh refinement, bone forging, blood tempering, and finally the purple blood concussion method, among others. Each branch was aimed at a specific realm of the body and formed a complete, independent method. Their subtlety and precision far exceeded that of an ordinary mid-level Yuanli forging technique. He tested that on himself. Using the purple blood skin tempering, Ye Tian managed to temper skin that had earlier refused to take. It responded and grew harder. But after several cycles, the progress stopped. There was a clear ceiling. Without breaking through that limit, he couldn't refine that part any further. So Ye Tian moved through the branches methodically. He refined his flesh, then his bones, then his blood, repeating each process until the foundation felt steadier and more compact. Only when the groundwork was secure did he begin to practice the purple blood concussion method. The concussion method was a choreography of movements designed to generate a focused shockwave through the body. That shock force rattled the internal organs, forcing the 5 Zhang and 6 Fu to harden and adapt far more quickly than ordinary tempering would allow. Ye Tian's tests confirmed it. The purple blood concussion technique was twice as effective as the intermediate Yuanli forging body method. With his current strength, 300,000 kilograms, and enough high-level fierce beast blood, combined with purple blood forging and extraordinary talent, he estimated he could truly reach the great martial artist's limit in less than 2 months. For the next month, he scarcely left his training chamber, pouring everything into cultivation. 30 days later, his power had skyrocketed. His physical strength had climbed to 680,000 kilograms. When the cooldown on his copying talent forced him to stop siphoning new abilities for a while, Ye Tian began searching the Demon Sea Base for anything useful. After a long hunt, he finally uncovered a high defense talent, not copied from any human genius, but from a remarkable pet, and, more importantly, a high King Kong bone talent taken from a vicious beast called the Wolverine. The King Kong bone talent functioned like the defense talent's twin, but it protected bone rather than flesh. Once activated, the bones became immensely tough. Even his finger bones would be capable of piercing steel. Even if an enemy managed to break through his primary defenses, the diamond bone would catch it as a secondary layer, an extremely effective backup. The talent itself didn't add much to Ye Tian's offensive power, but he copied it anyway to build a flawless foundation. If he could absorb a few more high-level diamond bone talents, he might eventually form a top-tier diamond bone ability. After replicating those 2 talents, Ye Tian returned to cultivation. A month later, his physical strength hit the great martial artist limit, 1 million jin. His power now was many times greater than it had been 2 months before. He worked out the numbers in his head and felt a thrill run through him. 1,000,000 Jin was the force of an elephant. With the boost from Yuan Force, it became the equivalent of 2 elephants. With the enhancement from the high power talent, it rose to 20 elephants. Add the 6-fold amplification from his Qingfeng chop, and the total reached the force of 120 elephants. Ye Tian stared in disbelief. A great martial artist wielding the power of 120 elephants. Unbelievable. A great martial artist's speed normally caps at about 6 times the speed of sound. But Ye Tian possessed an exceptional speed tall, ent that multiplied that limit 20-fold, propelling him to a staggering 120 times the speed of sound. Even if a sect master reached the peak of their power, Ye Tian estimated they would likely only manage a few dozen times the speed of sound. His own velocity was now rivaled only by those at the king level. Now that I've hit the great martial artist's ceiling, it's time to break through it. Give everything I've got. Ye Tian bristled with fighting spirit and eager determination. Chapter 90. Refining his skin had been Ye Tian's first breakthrough beyond his bodily limit, and now he was ready to copy and fuse a supreme defensive talent. Among humans, those with top-tier defensive talents were rare. The Demon Sea Grand Base hadn't even reported anyone with high or top defense among its disciples. The best they had was only a mid-level defensive aptitude. In contrast, fierce beasts often possessed high or top defensive talents. Ye Tian planned to take what he needed from a fierce beast, either a high defense or a top defense talent. He thought back to his previous stroke of luck. Encountering a fierce beast with a high defensive talent had been sheer fortune, and he knew fortune would not favor him twice. It was unrealistic to expect to collect 4 top talents while remaining inside the Demon Sea Grand Base. To obtain such rarities, he would have to go out into the wild. Originally, he had intended to venture into the wild only after achieving mastership. Now, however, if he wanted to shatter his bodily limits and forge an unassailable foundation, he had to leave the base sooner. Fortunately, the Demon Sea Grand Base's knowledge of fierce beasts was far more complete than that of the Linhai base, which gave him a better starting point for his search. The ledger listed countless varieties of fierce beasts, those with defensive talents, those with brute strength, diamond-boned beasts, and ones with rare bloodlines. After buying up the necessary materials, Ye Tian was ready to leave the Demon Sea Grand Base and head out into the wilds soon. Before he left, he called Xiao Zi and Xiao Jin over. "You two must protect Xiao Yu, understand?" he said. Both beasts nodded in unison, taking his command to heart. Ye Tian felt considerably more at ease knowing his sister would have their protection. Xiao Zi had just broken through to the top-tier beast level. While she had been trapped inside the secret realm, its rules had prevented her advancement, but now that she was free, the breakthrough came easily. Xiao Jin was at the very limit of the high-tier beast level and possessed an innate speed talent that ranked just below king-level speed. With those two working together, they could take down an ordinary sect master without trouble, and more than enough to keep Yeyu safe. The Demon Sea Grand Base was well defended, and the place was strictly policed. No one dared cause trouble there. Ye Tian had no real concern about Yeyu's safety while she remained inside the base. That day, he left. After passing through the array light gate and stepping out into the wilderness, he felt 5 presences trailing him at a distance. The 5 sect masters had come out behind him, keeping well away, but following nonetheless. Ye Tian detected them with his spatial sense and allowed himself a cold smile. He had expected company. Spending 190 billion yuan at the Wujie auction was a conspicuous move and had drawn attention. Even though he'd shaken off the stalker before, anyone who investigated thoroughly could trace his recent gains in the secret realm and see he had no powerful backing, making him an obvious fat sheep to be slaughtered. Those 5 sect masters were clearly a force sent to intercept and kill him. Even if they replaced themselves with other stronger fighters, they would be the ones in for trouble. Ye Tian, however, felt no fear. Ye Tian had 2 obvious options: teleport away or sprint off at a speed 120 times that of sound to shake the 5 pursuers. But either choice would reveal his top speed or spatial talent. The other option was uglier but simpler: kill the 5 sect masters and end the problem for good. He thought for only a second before deciding. Then kill them, he murmured. Neither side wanted to fight near the Demon Sea Grand Base. The 5 sect masters were wary of accidents in that area, and Ye Tian was equally reluctant to draw the powerful figures behind them into a public confrontation. Both parties ended up moving farther and farther away from the base. Ye Tian halted at the edge of a vast forest, the Cloud Sea Forest. It dwarfed the Little Thousand-Leaf Forest. It teemed with top-tier fierce beasts. Even king-class predators lived within its depths. It was a fitting place to bury trouble. He meant to settle the 5 who trailed him before stepping into the woods, to leave them buried beneath its hungry shadows. It was ruthless, but practical. They were closing fast. "Attack!" one of the sect masters barked. The 5 struck in unison, refusing to waste time. Energy coalesced, palms and blades cutting through the humid air. For a heartbeat, the world held its breath. Then the first explosion detonated, a thunderous shockwave that shredded leaves and sent debris hurtling in every direction. A murderous force swept through heaven and earth, 5 attacks moving with terrifying speed, nearly 20 times the speed of sound, far faster than any ordinary great warrior. To meet an assault like that, one would think only Yun Feng, the top-ranked master of the Demon Sea Grand Base, had the qualification to respond. But Ye Tian was no ordinary fighter. He was a battle genius who outclassed even the Cloud Wind Demon. "Ants," Ye Tian murmured, and in an instant he shot forward. Moving at a velocity that reached 120 times the speed of sound, he unleashed a single, lethal shadow slash. The effect was instantaneous. The 5 attackers' heads were severed. The 5 masters fell as easily as if they were common fodder, their headless bodies thudding to the ground. 5 storage pouches. Nice. Plenty of space, Ye Tian said, snatching the bags from the fallen masters before vanishing into the Cloud Sea Forest. Half a day later, a middle-aged man arrived on the scene. He looked around and quickly discovered the 5 corpses. Killed by blades, 5 masters cut down by a single strike? He stared in disbelief. Could it have been the top master who did this? The man was visibly shaken. He knew what a top-tier master could do. From the aftermath, it was obvious. The 5 men who lay dead were merely ordinary masters, only a little stronger than newly promoted fighters. Against someone at the very top, they never had a chance. The middle-aged man ground his teeth. "Damn," he muttered. He had assumed the 5 sect masters were trying to beat down a powerful martial artist by force. He never expected them to be slaughtered. Could the boy have been under the secret protection of a supreme sect master? The thought both angered and frustrated him. If he'd known what he was up against, he would have come himself. Now 5 lives were lost, and the prize they'd been after hadn't even been recovered. It was a total failure. He stared toward the Sea of Clouds forest, then let out a long, resigned sigh. They had found the bodies only because the dead men's locators still pinged. Finding the boy who had caused this carnage was another matter entirely. After hours of searching, there was no trace of him. Helpless, the man accepted that the pursuit had to be abandoned. They buried the 5 masters quickly. When the graves were filled, the middle-aged man turned and left the clearing. Inside the Sea of Clouds forest, however, the silence swallowed any sign of the fugitive. Ye Tian had simply vanished. Ye Tian had been searching for days. He'd turned up plenty of fierce beasts, but none with the top tier or even high defense talent he needed. The record said the Cloud Sea Forest held a huge variety of beasts, so if anything existed, it should be found here. He pushed his spatial perception outward. The perception rippled through the air like a silent wave, and everything within a 5-kilometer radius came into focus. Being able to sweep a full 5,000 meters at once was a new development. His cultivation had finally reached the limit of the great martial artist, far stronger than before, and with that advancement his spatial senses had naturally sharpened. 5 days slipped by. Ye Tian frowned as the search continued, then a mark lit up in his view. Black-armored bear. He smiled. Over 4 kilometers away, a massive, carapaced bear prowled through the forest, exactly the kind of target he'd been waiting for. According to the data, the black-armored bear likely possessed both exceptional defensive and strength talents. It was a high-level ferocious beast, practically an overlord among its peers. If it weren't a bit slower than the very fastest predators, it could take down most of them. "That's it," Ye Tian cried, then immediately gave chase. He could only use his replication ability within 600 meters of the black armored bear. Even with further training, that range would only stretch by another 100 meters. He felt a flash of helplessness at the limitation, but pushed on nonetheless. Chapter 91. Ye Tian moved quickly. He and the two teleporters closed in on the black armored bear, stopped about 500 meters away, and crouched in a large tree. They held their breath and did not immediately attack. "Copy first," Ye Tian ordered. He copied the black armored bear's high defense talent and immediately began the fusion. Merging advanced defensive talents caused him no pain. His consciousness stayed clear. Even if a ferocious beast attacked while he was fusing, he could still react and defend himself. 10 minutes passed. Sweat beaded on his forehead, and the fusion completed. He muttered, "It's almost ready to transform. My guess was right. If you gather 3 high defense talents, you can fuse them into a single top defense talent." After this fusion, he was only 1 high defense talent short of being able to form a top defense talent. Once he had that, he could try to push past the limits of his skin refinement. If the data's right, black armored bears come in male-female pairs. The one we just saw was a male, so there has to be a female nearby. If I can find her, I can copy her talent. The top defensive talent would basically be mine. Acting on that thought, Ye Tian locked onto the bear's position. The signal led him to a point more than 4 kilometers away, where the male black armored bear was locked in combat with a giant snake. The snake was classified as a top-tier fierce beast, albeit at the low end of that rank. It was much faster than the bear and tried to use speed and constriction to defeat it, but its attacks were useless against the bear's formidable defensive talent, like pebbles against a fortress. The struggle was short and brutal. The snake rapped and struck, but couldn't find purchase. The bear absorbed the blows and finally ripped the snake apart with a single brutal motion. When the dust settled, the giant snake lay in pieces. The black armored bear dragged the carcass off in one direction, already moving away from the clearing. The giant snake had been incredibly unlucky. A top-rank fierce beast had been slain by an even higher-level black armored bear. It couldn't outrun the bear, and trying to face it in close quarters would have been pure suicide. Ye Tian felt a pang of frustration at the snake's misfortune. "Chase!" he ordered. He teleported after the black-armed bear and followed it for tens of kilometers. Finally, the bear broke into a mountain peak and disappeared into a huge bear cave. Ye Tian stopped at the mouth of the cave and did not go inside, but his replica talent had already scanned and locked onto the other bear within. System readout. Species, black beetle bear. Bloodline talent, advanced strength talent, advanced defense talent, high. So it really is a female black beetle bear, Ye Tian murmured, surprised. Without hesitation, he copied the female bear's high defense talent. Once the copy completed successfully, he held off on fusing it and stepped quietly into the cave. "Sorry, your high power talent. I want it too," Ye Tian told the black armored bear without hesitation. There was no other way to copy such a talent from a living beast. He'd have to kill it, keep the corpse, and extract the talent a month later. He felt no guilt. Humans had lived ordinary lives on Earth until, overnight, a rift tore open in space and unleashed countless ferocious creatures. Thousands, then millions, had died. In the 100 years since, the toll had been incomprehensible. Compared to the beasts that poured through that tier, humans were the innocent victims. Sympathy for the predators was a luxury he could not afford. "Kill!" He snapped, and the fight was over almost before it began. The black armored bears were no match. Their strength was inferior, and their speed lethargic. Ye Tian moved in a blur, skewering one through the eye and crushing the other's skull. Both fell dead in an instant. He gathered the 2 carcasses, then opened his carry-on space and slid them in. The act of storing them felt routine, but it brought a small, practical satisfaction. His carry-on space cultivation had just improved again. Its capacity had risen to 200 cubes. Over the past 2 months, Ye Tian had made several trips to the Martial Pavilion, selling off a great many treasures. He'd cleared out enough space in his portable storage to carry the carcasses of 2 black-armored bears. After claiming the second body, he prepared to absorb the high defense talent stored within the beast. He focused and initiated the fusion. A sudden surge of power shot through him. For a time, it felt as though his skin were being ripped away and regrown 1,000 times, an agony far worse than he'd expected. The process of elevating the high defense talent into a top defense talent was more excruciating than Ye Tian had imagined, but he bore it through sheer will. He didn't notice how long it lasted. Eventually the pain ebbed, and a warm flush of relief and joy spread through him. Ye Tian let out a long, shaky breath and checked his status. Defense talent, top. A broad smile spread across his face. Ye Tian's next objective was clear: upgrade his power talent from high to top. That goal was almost within reach. He'd gained the body of the black armored bear, and in a month he would be able to duplicate 2 higher-grade power talents. Those duplicates would push his current high power talent up to top, and with it his overall strength would surge. His defensive talent had already reached the top tier. If Hurricane King's theory was right, that might be enough to break the limit on his skin-refining technique. I hope Hurricane King was correct, Ye Tian thought. He activated his defensive talent. Instantly, his defenses multiplied 20-fold. Even most sect masters would think twice before trying to pierce it. Satisfied, Ye Tian moved on to the next step. Begin purple blood alchemy. He focused, drawing in vast streams of heaven and earth yuan qi as he began tempering his skin. A sudden, sharp pain flared across his flesh, the unmistakable sting of quenching. Ye Tian's heart leapt. The skin was hardening. It was working. He could feel his skin being revived. The parts that had seemed beyond repair were being renewed. The Hurricane King's guess had been right. A top-tier talent could indeed help push the body past its limits. This is still too slow, Ye Tian muttered. At this rate, it'll take at least 2 months to break the body's limit. He swallowed a mouthful of high-grade fierce beast blood and resumed the purple blood alchemy to temper his skin. Almost immediately, his cultivation accelerated. The effects doubled, and he knew he could break the skin's limit within a month. A month, that was enough. His sister would be grown and able to fend for herself. He couldn't watch over her forever. With that settled, Ye Tian relaxed into his training. Day after day he cultivated, refining his skin. He felt the changes every morning and every night. The defenses hadn't leapt suddenly, but the foundation beneath them was strengthening. The essence of his skin was maturing. That steady, fundamental improvement was what mattered most. On the 26th day of cultivation, Ye Tian finally felt the invisible shackle that had bound his skin refinement. After downing dozens of vials of high-grade ferocious beast blood in one gulp, he threw himself desperately into the purple blood alchemy, hammering at his flesh tempering with every ounce of will. He could feel the shackles buried deep within him, like chains lodged in the underworld of his body, and he struck them again and again. He lost count of the blows and of the time it took. Pain and heat blurred together. Then, suddenly, the shackles shattered. A flood of heaven and earth yuan qi poured into him, suffusing and tempering his skin as the final step of the transformation completed. In that instant, Ye Tian realized he had truly broken through his previous limits. His skin refinement had risen to a whole new realm. Chapter 92. Ye Tian tested his defenses. Outwardly, nothing seemed to have changed. The defensive power felt about the same as before, but when he turned off his healing talent, he noticed something odd. His skin regenerated far faster than it had previously. Strange. Would breaking through the refinement realm only speed up skin recovery? He flicked the defensive talent back on. Immediately, a peculiar sensation ran through him. The defensive talent was no longer just an external ability, but seemed to be bonding with his skin, like a brand fusing into flesh. The more he let it integrate, the stronger the impression that his primary defensive talent was undergoing a profound transformation. If he pushed this integration further, the change would not be minor. It could fundamentally alter the talent, perhaps even shatter old limits. The Hurricane King had never mentioned anything like this. Maybe that was because he himself hadn't broken those limits. He only knew rumors of someone who had transcended the usual bounds of blood, making it far stronger, an altered bloodline rather than ordinary blood. Ye Tian, who hadn't broken any limits either, realized he was relying on hearsay. What might truly happen if one broke the limits was still unknown. Ye Tian knew he couldn't just rely on the Hurricane King's experience. He would have to test this himself. Still, he had a hunch. Perhaps a top-tier defensive special talent, once fully fused, could break through the ceiling and be promoted to an entirely different level. In the months since he'd arrived at the Demon Sea Grand Base, he'd heard rumors of an extraordinary cultivation talent that sat above the highest cultivation grades, but he had never once heard of an extraordinary grade special talent. Most people assumed that the top special talent was the ultimate limit. Ye Tian suspected that wasn't necessarily true. It simply meant the next step would be staggeringly difficult. If it were easy to surpass the top, it wouldn't follow the natural order. For example, top offensive talents could boost a fighter's strength by 20 times. If they could break the limit, who was to say they wouldn't multiply power 50-fold or more? That would be ridiculously overpowered. Because of that, any tier above the top special talent would be exceedingly rare among fierce beasts. If a beast did possess a special talent beyond the top, it would be capable of slaughtering enemies 2 great realms below it. Ye Tian didn't linger on the question of whether the defensive talent would fuse with his skin. That possibility might only happen once his foundation was perfected. Only then could the defensive talent truly bind to his body, and only then would it be clear if the talent could be advanced further. He steadied the refining realm he'd just shifted into, then turned back to cultivating his sword intent. Since he couldn't raise his cultivation level directly right now, insight and refinement were his best avenues for progress. His sword intent had already matured to the level known as sword intent. It could slay the soul. A single wisp of that intent, unleashed properly, could kill an ordinary martial artist from thousands of meters away. But against opponents of his own realm, it had little effect. By contrast, his blade intent had improved his knife techniques. It could unnerve and deter enemies, and when the intent fused with a technique, the blade work became far more fluid and unpredictable. For all that, Ye Tian had no intention of abandoning further study of his sword intent. Sword intent was the real key to sword techniques. Ye Tian Kai's bronze-level sword skill was already perfected, so he no longer needed any further enlightenment at that tier. But to advance into the silver tier, he had to raise his sword intent to reach the 20% mark of the sword intent realm. To push a silver-level technique to the Xiaocheng, minor completion stage, required 30% sword intent. To reach Dacheng, great completion, required 40%. And to bring a silver technique to true perfection demanded 60% SWO, RD intent. Because his sword intent hadn't reached those levels, Ye Tian Kai hadn't bothered seeking out silver-level manuals. More important, he realized something else. Sword technique could be compounded with raw strength, and that combination was devastating. Without improving his sword skill, he could never achieve the kind of destructive power he'd witnessed. Sword technique and physical strength were the only 2 attributes that could be stacked in that way. He could not afford to give up either one. So Ye Tian Kai continued to meditate on the meaning of the sword. Gradually, the mysteries unfolded and new insights came to him. In the blink of an eye, 4 days passed. Ye Tian felt the blade intent shift, only a small improvement, but enough to be considered an advancement in blade intent. It was time to replicate the power talent. He pulled the 2 black-armored bear corpses out of his carry-on space. They were exactly as they had been before, with no sign of decay. He began copying their high-level power talents. The second fusion hit him harder than the first. The pain was intense, but when it passed, he felt the power within him change. A new label appeared in his awareness. Strength talent, top. Ye Tian's heart leapt. A top-tier strength talent meant a direct, massive boost to his attack power. If he remembered correctly, top strength increased attack by 20-fold, and his sword technique, Qingfeng Slash, multiplied by 6. If the 2 stacked, that would be a 120 times increase. The thought stole his breath. He had to test it. He stepped out of the cave and took a stance. Top strength talent, activate, he shouted. Qingfeng Slash, now! A tremendous force exploded outward. Boom! Ye Tian's single slash tore through the earth. A 1,000-meter chasm opened beneath him. The trees along its path reduced to dust. The wound in the ground was so vast that if water were poured into it, a small river might form. The destruction was staggering, but Ye Tian frowned. There isn't a 120 eyes multiplier, only 100 times, he muttered. It's as if something in the dark is binding my power. Once it hits 100 times, it won't increase. Is 100 times the limit? He refused to accept that as a final answer. He had seen limits broken before. Whether one could break them depended on ability, not fate. I can break this limit, he told himself, just not yet. For now, I'll focus on laying a perfect foundation. 100-fold boost was already enough to send his strength soaring, so he allowed himself a satisfied smile and began running the numbers in his head to calculate his new attack power. Physical strength counted as the power of a single elephant. The boost from his Yuan force added the equivalent of 2 more. With the supreme strength talent combined with sword technique, the total could reach the equivalent of 200 elephants. The ordinary sect master's ultimate attack was only about 200 elephant power. In other words, Ye Tian's own striking power had already climbed to the peak of an ordinary master. So I'm effectively at an ordinary master's limit, Ye Tian said to himself, calm and confident. And my speed is still faster than theirs. The only people who can surpass me now are the few elite masters with offensive-type special talents. The rest I need no longer fear. He didn't linger on satisfaction. There was still a crucial barrier to break, the limit of flesh refinement. Unlock power talent, he commanded. Then, begin purple blood alchemy cultivation. Heaven and earth Yuan Qi surged in. A torrent of energy poured into Ye Tian, reshaping and tempering his muscles. The same sharp, tingling sensation, crispness mixed with numbness, that had accompanied earlier breakthroughs washed over him again as his body absorbed the influx. His refining realm could be pushed further, just as the skin refinement stage could be refined again. Ye Tian worked it out. With the aid of high-grade fierce beast blood, he could probably shatter the ceiling of flesh refinement in less than a month. Then I'll just cultivate like crazy. He threw himself into a ruthless ascetic regimen, pushing his body and spirit without mercy. Time narrowed to a single, relentless purpose. Before he realized it, 28 days had passed. Chapter 93. Just as he had with the final restraints of the skin refinement stage, Ye Tian now ran into the shackles of the flesh refinement realm. It took only a few hours for him to shatter them and break through the limit of refining flesh. As I thought, the strength aptitude is merging with my muscles, but the integration is slow. Once the foundation is truly perfected, I'll be able to tell how deep it goes, Ye Tian muttered to himself. At this point, his strength and defense aptitudes had both reached their peaks. He had already overcome the limits of refining skin and flesh. The next step was to find a higher or top-tier bone system talent. Those bone aptitudes were extremely rare. Only a handful of ferocious beasts possessed them. Wolverines were among the few that could grant such a talent. Wolverine packs are social animals, Ye Tian reminded himself. If you can find a pack, you can fuse their top Wolverine talent. The problem is, they're very hard to find. The Cloud Sea Forest was vast, impossibly vast, and its heart was said to be home to a king-level existence. That alone made venturing deep inside incredibly dangerous. If the Wolverine beast had retreated to the forest's depths, Ye Tian realized there would be no way to track it down and copy its Wolverine bone talent. Still, there was reason for cautious hope. The Wolverine beast had been captured before, and the reports said that happened somewhere in the Cloud Sea Forest. If it could be found once, perhaps it could be found again. Ye Tian's other option was the King Kong beast. He already possessed a high King Kong bone talent. If he could copy 2 more King Kong bone talents, he might achieve his goal without having to find another high-grade bone talent, a far simpler path than searching the forest's most dangerous reaches. With that plan in mind, he set off to find the Wolverine beast, or any lead that would lead him to either creature. On the 3rd day of his search, he ran into a party on the trail. About 40 people in all, 35 great martial practitioners, and 5 sect masters. But these weren't ordinary sect masters. By the air of authority and the strength that radiated from them, Ye Tian judged them to be far more powerful than the 5 sect masters he had killed the last time he'd run afoul of a sect. He froze for a moment, taking measure of them. A contingent like this in the Cloud Sea Forest could only mean trouble or opportunity. Either way, whatever came next would be dangerous. There were 35 martial artists in the group, many of them prodigies with strong offensive talents. On paper, they were a formidable force, but Ye Tian noticed something important. They were badly disciplined. The men argued among themselves and moved without coordination. More importantly, they were clearly searching for something. Ye Tian suspected they might have information about the Wolverine, so he deliberately crossed their path. "Stop!" one of the masters barked as soon as they saw him. Feigning surprise, Ye Tian called back, "What? I'm looking for the Wolverine." Several sect leaders exchanged looks, half amused, half worried. "You want to take on the Wolverine beast?" one of them scoffed. "That thing has the rare Wolverine bone trait. Its bones are like iron. It's notoriously hard to kill. If it strikes you, it could shatter every bone in your body." Ye Tian met their doubts with calm confidence. "I have a way to deal with the Wolverine." "Oh, do you have a special talent?" one of the masters asked. "We're short-handed and about to take down a powerful beast king. Want to come with us? Intelligence reports say he commands several Wolverine beasts." "Really?" Ye Tian asked, skeptical. "We won't sugarcoat it," another master said. "If your strength is weak, you won't qualify to join our team." With that, he stepped forward to test Ye Tian. In a blur, Ye Tian moved, displaying speed, but instead of the 120x burst the masters might have expected, he only showed an 18-fold acceleration, the level of a primary speed talent. Primary speed talent. Good. You're qualified to join us. The 5 masters brightened. Even a basic speed talent, coupled with the potential to reach great warrior rank, was more than enough for the job. They would be responsible for confronting the Beast King himself. The pack of high-level beasts under its command would be handled by the great warriors. They had gathered so many top warriors for a reason, to deal with high-level ferocious beasts. Ye Tian watched them and asked, skeptical, "A Beast King? Is it that hard to be king level?" He wasn't convinced it really was a Beast King. If it truly were, this whole group would have run for their lives. He asked deliberately to test them. One of the sect elders smiled. "It's not a Beast King, but even if it were, don't worry. Our 5 masters are more than enough to handle it. You won't be in any danger, and when it's all over, you'll be awarded a treasure worth 5 billion. Several of the masters echoed the promise. 5 billion. For a great martial artist, that was a staggering sum. Almost no one would refuse it. Still, Ye Tian couldn't help but doubt. With so many great martial artists involved, the total payout would have to exceed 100 billion, and there was no way the 5 sect masters would casually hand over more than 100 billion. Anyone with sense could see the logic. The smarter move was to join them. Refusing would have only made him a target. If he hadn't come along, they'd have talked him to a standstill, or worse, opened fire. Ye Tian let out a dark snort, but he had his own reasons. His real goal was the Beast King. If this group could actually lead him to the Beast King, then joining them was worth it. Besides, he suspected that some among the 5 masters were genuine, and that the Beast King might indeed have several of the King Kong Beast's men in his service. He gave a curt answer. "I'll join." The leader of the 5 nodded. "Welcome to our temporary alliance. Stay in step." The 5 masters laughed and set off again in search of other warriors. Days passed, 3 in all. But despite their efforts, they couldn't bring a single new master into their fold. Whenever they encountered one of the great grandmasters, the others would warn each other through spiritual sense and refuse to meet. It was clear. None of them wanted the grandmasters to learn of the Beast King's existence. "We're closing in. We can move now," one of the masters said. At his words, the group turned and plunged deeper into the Cloud Sea forest. They ran for nearly a day before finally dropping into a valley. The 5 masters led the way, the other great martial ultimate practitioners close behind. No sooner had they entered than the ground trembled. A stampede of beasts came charging, dozens of them, mostly mid-level predators. There were all kinds mixed together, creatures that normally would never share the same territory. It was obvious someone, or something, had gathered them. That something was the Beast King the 5 masters had come to confront. "Attack!" one of the masters barked. The group ignored the lesser beasts. A single martial artist surged forward and cut them down with brutal efficiency. Then a heavy, imposing aura rolled in, and behind it came the unmistakable signatures of numerous high-level beasts. The Beast King had arrived with his own elite retinue. In an instant, the Beast King manifested before them. Ye Tian's replication talent spread out, sweeping a 600-meter radius, allowing him to probe the Beast King's nature. When he saw the Beast King's talent, he went completely still. It was species, Velociraptor Beast. Bloodline talent, extraordinary. Defense talent, primary. Strength talent, primary. Speed talent, elementary. Seeing those talent ratings, Ye Tian finally understood what kind of Beast King they were up against. A young king beast. He'd encountered many fierce beast species before, including the swift dragon beast, which with an extraordinary bloodline could easily become a king-level creature once fully mature, on par with human king-tier fighters. The Velociraptor standing before him had only just risen to the top rank of fierce beasts. Its defense, strength, and speed were only at basic levels, but that didn't make it a pushover. Ye Tian could handle it by himself, but if the 5 masters wanted to take it down, they would have to pay a real price. No wonder the 5 of them had called in so many reinforcements. They were the ones who had to deal with the swift dragon beast and couldn't afford any distractions. The high-level ferocious beasts were formidable, and many of them even had special talents. If those creatures coordinated an attack, things would quickly become dangerous. Ye Tian's expression went dark. Bang! The 5 masters were locked in deadly combat with the swift dragon beast, each unable to gain the upper hand. Around them, the other warriors were doing their best to hold back the swarm of high-level beasts. Ye Tian himself was engaged with one of those creatures, though he didn't finish it off. He was hunting for the King Kong beast. There were a lot of high-level beasts here, easily 100 or more. Using his replica talent to sense their signatures, Ye Tian soon located 3 wolverine beasts. Those 3 were powerful. They pressed the assault so fiercely that 3 of the specially talented great warriors were forced to fall back in turn. The wolverine beast's bones were insanely tough. Even a strike on the scale of a grandmaster could at best tear flesh and skin. It could not be driven through the creature's body. Its paws were like living weapons, as strong as a high-grade Yuanli implement. The blades of a great martial artist would splinter against them. The high Congo bone talent really was terrifying. Ye Tian had quietly copied the 2 Congo beasts' high Congo bone talents for himself, and after that he paid them no further attention. Before long, a well-known warrior fell in battle, and the number of great warriors dwindled sharply. This group of great warriors has been wiped out, Ye Tian said to himself, shaking his head. The 5 masters, however, showed no real concern for the losses among the great warriors. Their priority was killing the Velociraptor dragon beast quickly. If they didn't, the other high-level monsters would be spooked, and the whole plan would collapse. The deaths of a few great warriors were expected, and to them, an acceptable cost. Use that thing. The little ones can't hold them off any longer. They're dying, and if we don't act, we'll be besieged by a horde of high-level beasts, one master's spiritual voice warned. The other master understood at once and snatched up something that looked like a syringe. He charged the Velociraptor beast. The creature slammed into him and sent him skidding back, but not before he drove the syringe home. The tip punched through the beast's hide and embedded in its flank. The Velociraptor's defense was formidable. It possessed a primary defensive talent. Still, this wasn't an ordinary needle. It was forged from a rare metal and designed to channel Yuan force into a concentrated piercing point, allowing it to breach even strong defenses. The syringe's contents were equally extraordinary. A special anesthetic blended from a mixture of rare heavenly and earthly treasures. It could sedate nearly any top-tier beast. Only a truly ferocious creature with an anti-poison talent could hope to resist it. Success! The 5 masters cried in relief. They had actually brought several syringes, kept on the sect master, the one with the low-speed talent. They hadn't expected to succeed on the first try, so they were surprised when the Velociraptor-like beast offered almost no resistance, and the injection worked. Ye Tian, watching from a short distance away, immediately understood what was happening. They weren't here to hunt the swift dragon beast. They were trying to capture it. Many cultivators did this. capture top-tier feral beasts and sell them. That's how so many dangerous beasts ended up in the Demon Sea Grand Base. A juvenile king-class beast is worth an unimaginable amount of money. No wonder they'd risk trying to seize it. If they could secure a young king beast, even sacrificing 100 elite fighters, or 1,000 lesser ones, would be worth it. Once you control a young king beast, it's almost the same as owning a full king beast. That kind of asset could revive an entire clan. Even Ye Tian knew such a creature was far beyond what he could afford. Ye Tian had no intention of taking the young king beast. For one thing, he wasn't short of money. For another, capturing the creature would almost certainly offend not only the cub but its parent, a true king beast, and risk provoking a beast tide. Beast tides were no small matter. 40 years earlier, the capture of a young king beast had enraged its parent. That adult king beast led scores of other king beasts and countless top-tier feral predators in an assault that nearly breached the Demon Sea base. In that battle, the Hurricane King fell, at least 5 other powerful kings died, and the number of lesser masters lost was beyond reckoning. The swift dragon beast might be on the weaker end of the king beasts, but it was still dangerous to anger any king beast now. If the cub was traced back to him, people could easily claim he'd sold it off. Worse, if a beast tide actually occurred, Ye Tian could be singled out as the target of the beast's wrath. So even if he killed the young king beast, bringing it back to the Demon Sea base was out of the question. They had been brazen to the point of audacity, 5 masters working together to capture a young king-class beast. Such a feat was risky, but with their combined strength they could slip away from the watchful eyes of the larger strongholds and carry off their prize. The swift dragon beast couldn't withstand the sedative. Its struggles slowed and then stopped. With a heavy thud, it collapsed to the earth. The 5 masters erupted into cheers. "Finish off the other predators," one barked. They turned on the remaining high-level beasts and cut them down without mercy. In a very short time, the battlefield lay littered with carcasses. Only a few of the wounded monsters managed to stagger off and escape. "We survived!" Someone with a severed hand cried out, relief flooding his voice. He never had a chance to savor it. A sword blade flashed, and his throat was opened from ear to ear. As blood spattered, he looked up and made out a familiar face, one of the 5 masters, before collapsing. He died without ever managing to ask why his killer had turned on them. The other survivors stood frozen, terror rooting them in place, already dreading what would come next. "I don't want the 5 billion anymore. Please, let me go. I'm a member of the Hong family from the great base of the Demon Sea. If you kill me, the Hong family won't let you live. Please, I don't want to die. I'll be your servant. Just spare me." No amount of pleading, threatening, or bargaining changed the 5 masters' minds. "No matter who you are, our capture of the swift dragon beast must not be exposed. You have to die," one of the grandmasters said coldly. Explosions cracked through the air as the remaining warriors scattered in every direction. The 5 grandmasters, each using their speed talents, pursued them without mercy, cutting down the fugitives with terrifying efficiency. One by one, the great warriors fell until only Ye Tian remained. The masters studied him with mild curiosity. "Boy," one said, "your speed talent is only at the elementary level. You might actually have a chance to escape. Why don't you run?" Ye Tian opened his mouth, then an innocent smile, flashing white teeth. "Because," he said calmly, "I can kill you." Chapter 95, Kill Us? The 5 masters burst into scornful laughter. The boy in front of them had to be mad. Who did he think he was, threatening to kill all 5 of them? They weren't weaklings, not by a long shot. Even a renowned fighter like Yunfeng couldn't take all of them at once. There was no way this kid could hope to escape, let alone survive an attempt on their lives. "You're insane," one grandmaster sneered. With that, another master lunged, a clean, brutal strike aimed straight for Ye Tian's face. For an instant, everything hung in the air. Then the attacker froze, split from shoulder to waist, and collapsed in 2 lifeless halves. Silence sucked the wind from the other's lungs. He killed Tian with a single blade. The 4 remaining masters stared in stunned disbelief. Tian had been a true grandmaster. Even if a talented warrior had drawn a weapon, they wouldn't expect such devastating effect. And yet Ye Tian had felled him in one perfect stroke. To hell with this, go at him together, the four masters roared, fury and fear flashing across their features. But to Ye Tian it made no difference whether it was one enemy or four. He stood calm and unflinching, ready for whatever came next. Shadow kill! Ye Tian unleashed the technique and blurred forward at a speed 120 times that of sound. The sect masters in front of him might as well have been toddlers. They couldn't even register his approach. In a heartbeat, he sliced through them, 4 razor-quick cuts that severed 4 heads before anyone could react. The fifth master collapsed in the chaos. With all 5 leaders dead, Ye Tian rifled their bodies for storage bags. He glanced at the swift dragon beast nearby and, without hesitation, ended it with a single stroke. Then he collected the creature's blood. It was the blood of a top-grade ferocious beast, a juvenile king-class specimen, far superior in quality to ordinary beast blood and perfect for refining the body. A tidy haul. 1,000 units of top beast blood, nice, Ye Tian said, satisfied. He decided not to haul the body away. A single corpse of even a high-grade beast wasn't worth the trouble, and this young swift dragon had no valuable traits anyway. Worse, the carcass was huge, well over 30 meters long, and would have eaten up most of the space in his carry pouch, so Ye Tian gave it up and walked away. 3 hours later, a titanic swift dragon arrived in the valley. It was nearly 100 meters long and radiated the presence of a king-level beast. When it saw the mutilated body of the youngster, it erupted into a frenzy. A roar split the sky. For hundreds of miles, the king's ferocity spread like a living thing. Find the humans! Kill them, the swift dragon bellowed, and a tide of lesser beasts answered the command and surged outward. Ye Tian, already some distance away, felt the change in the cloud sea forest even in the dark. A crushing, suffocating pressure rolled over the region. He recognized the signature at once. That can only be the king-level swift dragon, he said to himself. There was no time to linger. He turned and fled the cloud sea forest to put as much distance between himself and the beast as possible. That day, the cloud sea forest was besieged by ferocious beasts. Many human warriors were set upon, and the king beast known as the swift dragon personally cut down numerous masters. In the end, a grand base king from the demon sea arrived and engaged the swift dragon in a titanic battle, finally defeating it and ending the immediate threat. There was no beast tide. The swift dragon standing in the forest was still too low to trigger one. At best, it could hunt and slaughter the humans inside the cloud sea forest. After leaving the forest, Ye Tian climbed to a mountain peak, carved out a temporary cave dwelling, and went inside to begin fusing the 2 high-level diamond bone talents he had copied. Fusion, he intoned, over and over as he worked. One by one, the 2 talents were fused into him. Rumble. His bones felt as if they were being torn apart repeatedly. An ordinary person would have fainted, but Ye Tian had endured too many talent fusions to break now. He forced himself to withstand it. Half an hour passed. The fusion was over. Ye Tian was drenched from head to toe. He activated the retinal display. As he'd hoped, the Congo bone talent had completed its metamorphosis. The line of text blinked clearly. Diamond bone talent, top. Relief flooded him. He'd worried he wouldn't be able to gather 4 top-tier talents, defense, strength, bone, and bloodline, so quickly. Now 3 were done. The last one remained, but it no longer felt impossible. One more step toward a perfect foundation. I won't rush the bloodline talent, he told himself. First, I'll break the limit of bone refinement. After resting for half a day and fully recovering his strength, Ye Tian began cultivating the purple blood bone forging technique. He reached for the vial containing swift dragon beast blood to help amplify the technique, then froze, utterly dumbfounded. What about my velociraptor beast blood? Ye Tian rifled through the carry compartment again and again, but there was no trace of it. The little vial was open and completely empty. If the cap had come off by accident, the blood would have sloshed out across the lining. It wouldn't simply vanish. He frowned. This was too strange. If he couldn't figure out what had happened, he wouldn't dare store anything valuable in that compartment again. Ye Tian closed his eyes and sent out a probing thread of spiritual power. The scan drifted over the scattered items and finally fixed on the dragon egg. Its life force pulsed back at him, thick and golden, far stronger than anything else in the case. That much vitality, it would be difficult to interfere with or recover whatever it had taken. Then a possibility occurred to him. 1,000 copies of his Velociraptor beast blood, his swift dragon blood vials, had been absorbed by the dragon egg. I see. Ye Tian's expression sharpened as understanding clicked into place. The name Swift Dragon Beast even contains the word dragon, so it likely carries dragon blood. Ye Tian realized that might explain why the Warblood Heavenly Dragon Egg hasn't hatched. It simply lacked dragon power. If the egg ingested the Swift Dragon Beast's blood, it would suddenly gain that dragon energy. A thought occurred to him. What if the Swift Dragon Beast had been feeding on some other ferocious creature that itself possessed a dragon bloodline? If so, the Warblood Heavenly Dragon could have been conceived through that chain of consumption. He examined the embryo more closely. The Warblood Heavenly Dragon showed 10 special talents on its body, and one of them looked like a bloodline talent. To be sure, Ye Tian activated his replication talent and probed the ability. Blood Devourer talent. Because the Blood Dragon hadn't actually hatched yet, the rank of its Blood Devourer talent remained unknown. If, however, it turned out to be a top-tier talent, Ye Tian wouldn't need to go hunting for the Warblood Heavenly Dragon. He could simply copy its Blood Devourer talent directly. That would give him 4 top-tier talents in one stroke. Chapter 96. You can try, Ye Tian murmured. There are many fierce beasts that carry dragon blood, though the dragon blood veins are usually thin. According to the data, the Demon Sea Grand Base isn't far from a high-level group of dragon-blooded beasts. If I wipe out that group and use the blood of the whole clan to nourish the Warblood Heavenly Dragon Egg, it should be possible to force the Warblood Heavenly Dragon to hatch. He decided he would go after that beast group as soon as he broke through the bottleneck in his bone refinement. For the next month, he didn't leave his temporary cave dwelling. Day after day, he drilled the purple blood bone forging technique and practiced enlightening the sword intention. After consuming a great deal of high-level beast blood and nearly 29 days of relentless effort, Ye Tian finally shattered the limit of his bone refinement. The bones throughout his body seemed to wake, and his diamond bone talent began to fuse slowly and thoroughly with his skeleton. He had refined his skin, refined his flesh, and now he had refined his bones. All 3 physical attributes had broken their limits. Once they surpassed the threshold of blood refinement and achieved true blood exchange and transformation, the most important foundation would be complete. After that, they would only need to break the limits of their internal organs. It's time to find that high-level fierce beast that carries dragon blood, Ye Tian murmured. The place he spoke of lay within the Demon Sea's Great Basin in a canyon 8,000 kilometers to the west. From within the canyon came a large, burrowing population known as the dragon snake beasts. They had long, sinuous bodies like snakes and 4 clawed limbs. They lacked the characteristic dragon head and horns of true dragons, but they were far from weak, many ranked as high-level fierce beasts. Among them, a very small number were classified as top-tier fierce beasts. Fewer than 20 were known to exist. Even so, most dragon snake beasts were not large. At about 1 meter in length, a single carcass yielded little fierce beast blood, so their corpses were of limited value. For that reason, no powerful master or king-level figure had made a habit of hunting in those canyons. On this day, however, Ye Tian had come. Ye Tian entered the canyon. No sooner had he stepped in than a dozen dragon snake beasts spotted him and surged forward. Calmly, he crushed them one after another with his bare hand, squeezing until each went limp. Then he took out the Battle Blood Heavenly Dragon Egg and let the dragon snake blood drip onto its shell. "This has to work," he muttered. A flash of golden light answered him. The blood on the shell was drawn in and vanished. "It actually works!" Ye Tian exclaimed, heart racing. He stashed the egg and launched into a frenzied hunt, slaughtering beasts and funneling their blood into his portable storage space. When the storage neared capacity, he dug a pit in the canyon floor, dumped the corpses in, and let the blood collect into a crimson pool. He lowered his voice. "A top-tier ferocious dragon snake is coming." He swallowed hard and waited. A stream of light rushed in, carrying a monstrous killing intent. Each ray represented a top, fierce beast, about 20 in all. Individually, each of those top-tier beasts outclassed an ordinary master. Together, 20 of them could contend with a powerful grandmaster. Ye Tian's own strength was only on par with an ordinary grandmaster, so the situation was dangerous. Rumble. The air split as a green gale swept through like a razor. Ye Tian's strikes cut down the invaders one after another. Dragon snake beasts fell, and their bodies piled up. For half a day he pressed the assault, hunting dragon, snake, and beast across the canyon until the whole ravine was littered with corpses. At last, every dragon snake beast lay dead. Ye Tian let out a long breath. "Good thing I copied the medium endurance talent from Xiao Jin," he muttered. "I would have run out of strength ages ago otherwise." Crow, ooching, he gathered the beast's blood and willed it into a huge crimson pool. Now, he hurled the battle blood heavenly dragon egg into the basin of blood, and immediately a brilliant reaction exploded out of it. Wow! A vortex opened in the blood pool. The blood of the dragons, snakes, and beasts streamed toward the center, all draining into the exact spot where the battle blood heavenly dragon egg lay. "The egg's blood-sucking ability is ridiculous," Ye Tian murmured. "This has to be the blood-devouring talent at work." In less than 10 minutes, the vast pool of dragon snake beast blood had been swallowed up by the egg. The battle blood heavenly dragon egg now radiated a fierce, unmistakable dragon aura. Where it had once been a dull, lifeless shell, it was becoming a true dragon egg. If the Woog had ever auctioned eggs like this before, they probably wouldn't have put them up for sale at all, Ye Tian said, smiling. And even if they had, I couldn't have competed. The bidding would have reached king-level prices. Having absorbed that enormous volume of blood, the egg seemed finally conceived. Ye Tian could feel the life force within it steadily growing. Before there had been only a faint throb, now the life force was actually rising. The egg's vitality was rising, unmistakable proof that it was truly alive and would soon give birth. "It won't be long before this thing hatches into a battle blood heavenly dragon," Ye Tian told himself. That raised a more pressing problem: control. This wasn't a toy, it was a real dragon. If it hatched and he couldn't control it, if it bolted, the consequences could be disastrous. The safest option, Ye Tian decided, was to make the battle blood heavenly dragon his pet. There had to be a way. The Demon Sea Base traded in fierce beasts all the time, many of them notoriously difficult to tame, yet the merchants still managed to keep them as companions. They clearly used methods other than the blunt threats Ye Tian had relied on before with Xiao Jin and Xiao Zi, methods that made the beasts submit willingly. If those traders could do it, so could he. Ye Tian planned to return to the Demon Sea Base and consult Yuling. Maybe she knew a better, more reliable way to subdue a newly hatched dragon. A few months later, he returned to the Demon Sea Grand Base. His first stop was home. The host! The moment Xiao Jin spotted Ye Tian, the little beast bounded over with excitement. "Master! I broke through. I've become a top ferocious beast." Ye Tian only nodded. Becoming a top-tier beast in a few months wasn't surprising. Out in the wild, with plenty of blood to feed on, growth could be rapid. Xiao Jin cocked its head, still puzzled. "Master, why are you still only a great warrior?" "You think you can beat me?" Ye Tian said, staring at the beast. Xiao Jin hurriedly backed down. "Master, if I dared to fight you, I wouldn't be your match." It knew all too well how terrifying its master could be. Ye Tian could cross levels and slaughter an opponent as easily as drinking water. Even a newly crowned top ferocious beast wouldn't stand a chance. For speed, Xiao Jin fancied itself faster, but as a loyal pet, it had no other thoughts. That evening, Ye Yu returned. A few months ago, he had been stuck at the middle stage of martial cultivation. Now he had broken into the late stage, only one step away from becoming an elite martial artist. That night, Ye Tian handed Ye Yu a storage pouch filled with supplies, several vials of intermediate-grade fierce beast blood and a small portion of high-grade fierce beast blood, then told him to cultivate on his own. Beyond providing those resources, there was nothing more Ye Tian could do to help. The next day, Ye Tian used a liaison device to contact Yuling and invited him to dinner at a large hotel. Yuling arrived as promised. Chapter 97. They ran into each other. "Ye Tian, I haven't seen you in months. Why did you suddenly reach out?" Yuling teased, feigning annoyance. Ye Tian scratched the back of his head, a little embarrassed. I've been out hunting beasts in the wild these past few months. He didn't mention leaving the Demon Sea Grand Base, but Yueling already knew. Her first question had been purely to needle him. So what do you want? Yueling leaned in. What are you calling me for after disappearing like that? Ye Tian didn't dance around it. I want to ask, do you know any way to subdue a fierce beast? Yueling blinked. Wait, don't you already have 2 pets? Why are you asking me about this? Ahem, Ye Tian said helplessly. Those 2 fierce beasts, they were intimidated into surrendering to me, but I don't actually know how to keep them under control. Yueling's eyes widened. A ferocious beast that could be threatened into surrendering to a lord, that meant it must be unusually intelligent. It was precisely that intelligence that would make a creature know how to save its own life by submitting. If a beast had that level of sense, it was a rare find. You're so lucky, she said, genuinely envious. She answered Ye Tian honestly. There are a few ways to subdue a fierce beast. The first is what you tried, a direct challenge, but that has a very low success rate. The second is to have a king-level powerhouse extract the beast's soul light. Others can then absorb that soul light to complete the binding. The third is to use a warrior with a beast control talent to dominate the creature and force it into submission. At the Demon Sea Grand Base, most fierce beasts were handled by people with beast control talents. From that practice, they developed the beast control card. Once refined, a card can be used to subdue a beast. If a particular creature is especially stubborn, you can hire a beast controller to handle it. Their fee is charged according to the beast's level. For someone like you, it wouldn't cost much. A beast control talent? That sort of talent? Ye Tian blinked in surprise. There were all kinds of strange abilities in the world, and with this option available, he no longer had to worry. Ye Tian realized he could simply copy a beast-controlling talent himself. There was no need to go ask the beast-taming master for help. He thanked Yueling earnestly. Thank you so much. Yueling waved him off with a laugh. We're friends. It's nothing, but if you come by later, I'll probably be in retreat. A retreat to break through to the sect master realm? Ye Tian guessed. Yueling nodded. Yes. I'm already at the top of my current realm. Breaking through to the sect master realm is certain, 100%. The next time you see me, I'll be a sect master. He glanced at Ye Tian and added, You should speed up too. I think you've reached the ceiling of the great martial artist. Rush your advancement into the sect master realm as soon as possible. Only as a sect master can you gain that 200-year lifespan and learn the greater, more wondrous things. The great martial artist stage is just the foundation. You don't want to stay there too long. I understand, Ye Tian said with a faint smile, and didn't argue. Whether Yueling truly knew the full situation, or was simply encouraging him, Ye Tian kept the thought to himself. For most martial artists, forging a perfect foundation was nothing but a fantasy, something impossible to actually achieve. He didn't press Yueling to try for the perfect foundation level. He knew well that with her current circumstances, a flawless foundation was out of reach, and there was no point in demanding it. After they finished eating, they went their separate ways. Ye Tian didn't head home. Instead, he walked toward the Beast Hall's headquarters, the central market for trading fierce beasts. The Beast Hall was a major power with numerous branches scattered throughout the Demon Sea base, all specializing in the sale of fierce beasts. Its headquarters housed a large number of createurs, including many top-tier beasts. The high diamond bone talent Ye Tian had copied previously had come from one of the Beast Hall's branches. This time, he went straight to the headquarters. He was convinced the beast control talents would be stored there, and once he gained access to their source, he could copy the beast control techniques just as easily. When Ye Tian stepped into the Beast Hall, a very pretty young attendant kept hurrying over to him, eagerly introducing each of the ferocious beasts. She was all enthusiasm. Ye Tian gave her only perfunctory attention. His focus was elsewhere, on his talent-copying ability. He extended his senses and swept a 600-meter radius. Everything within that ring, each beast and every notable warrior, came under his inspection. A satisfied smile crossed his face. He had found not only a beast control talent, but also an extraordinary level cultivation talent. He read the details at a glance. Human, Li Pei, Cultivation talent, top. Beast control talent, advanced. Human, Zhao Ke. Cultivation talent, extraordinary level. Fire knife talent, medium. Jai looked to be the master of the beast hall, likely king rank, and with a medium fire knife talent, he was a formidable figure even among other king ranks. Ye Tian noted this quietly. He said nothing, but with a single silent thought, he copied the extraordinary level cultivation talent. Ye Tian had already copied 2 extraordinary grade cultivation talents. One more, and he would be promoted to the tier above extraordinary. He hadn't been in a hurry to chase talent upgrades. His priority was building a flawless foundation, but when he actually ran into an extraordinary grade talent in the Beast Hall, he couldn't pass it up. The Beast Hall offered 2 copying opportunities, and Ye Tian used them both. First, to copy the extraordinary grade cultivation talent, and then to take the beast control talent. With both copies exhausted, there was no reason for him to linger. "Sorry, little sister, I have to go. I'll buy a fierce beast next time," he said, ignoring the attendant girl's pleading look, and left the hall without another word. Back home, he couldn't wait to start fusing the new talents. He worked on the advanced beast control talent first. The fusion went smoothly, effortful, but uncomplicated, leaving only a sheen of sweat on his brow. After half an hour of cultivation, Ye Tian prepared to fuse his extraordinary grade talent up to the next level. He braced himself. This would hurt. He knew that promoting a talent was always agonizing, and raising an already extraordinary talent would be worse than anything he had felt so far. He drew a long breath and began the merge. Pain exploded through him like a tightening vice, sharper and deeper than anything he'd known. It felt 100 times worse than childbirth. Without Ye Tian's iron will, he might have passed out. Inside his consciousness, a second stretched into an eternity. He had no sense of how long it lasted, only that eventually the torment ebbed and he came back to himself. "That was brutal. I don't want to do that again," he muttered, breathless. Still, part of him thought clearly. If the payoff were worth it, he'd endure even more. Opportunities like this didn't come often. Ye Tian activated his copy talent to inspect the result. At that moment, he noticed a new talent rating flash before him, cultivation talent. Morning Star, could this be a tier above extraordinary? Ye Tian's heart leapt with hope and expectation. Chapter 98. Ye Tian forced down the shock the Morning Star cultivation talent had caused. He was already at the great martial artist limit, so he couldn't test how much the extraordinary level Morning Star talent would speed up cultivation. That would have to wait until he broke through to the Sect Master realm. Putting that aside, he turned his attention to the beast control talent. As he studied it, he made a useful discovery. The talent could extract and strip away a beast's soul light. In other words, he could sever the bond with Xiao Jin and Xiao Zi whenever he chose. He tried it out with Xiao Zi first. The beast control recognition went smoothly, just as easy as the previous tests. There was no difference in the process. But when he attempted to force Xiao Jin into swearing fealty, to make the beast acknowledge him as master against its will, the attempt failed. In the end, he had no choice but to let Xiao Jin come forward and submit of its own accord. After repeated experiments, Ye Tian reached a conclusion. There has to be a link between beast control aptitude and the beast's soul, he thought. I'm only at the limit of the great warrior realm, while Xiao Jin is already a top-rank ferocious beast. In terms of realm and soul strength, he's stronger than I am, so I can't force him to acknowledge me as his lord. Still, Ye Tian wasn't discouraged. His beast control talent was potent. As long as a creature's realm wasn't higher than his own, he could compel it to submit. He took the battle blood heavenly dragon egg out again. The life force radiating from the shell was even stronger now, as if it were about to burst forth. Soon, he guessed, probably less than 10 days before it hatches. 10 days wasn't long. Ye Tian resolved to set aside other cultivation for a while and focus only on refining his sword intent. 10 days flew by. On the final day, the air around Ye Tian suddenly convulsed. He felt it in his bones and knew at once the battle blood heavenly dragon was about to hatch. He hurriedly took the egg from its case and activated the villa's soundproofing and concealment arrays. Xiao Jin fixed its wide eyes on the egg. It wasn't unfamiliar with it. Their master often took the egg out to look it over. and until now, it had never thought the egg particularly special. But now a heavy pressure radiated from it that made Xiaojin recoil. The pressure kept growing, and it wasn't a suppression of strength so much as of blood. Ferocious beasts rely on their blood veins. Their growth follows the veins. A beast born with a supreme bloodline can refine its blood and flesh from pure heaven and earth qi alone, without needing rare treasures or the flesh of other monsters. That is the advantage of a top-tier bloodline, and yet whatever force pressed down on this egg was suppressing the bloodline itself. Xiaojin's voice trembled. Master didn't bring back the egg of a king-level beast, did he? He stared, stunned. For some reason, every time this egg was about to hatch, I had the same sinking feeling, that I was about to fall out of favor. I tried to tell myself it was just my imagination. It wasn't. Ye Tian was preparing to make the hatchling into Yeyu's beast pet. A person can only bind so many beast pets. The soul endurance is limited. To make room to control the war-blood heavenly dragon, Ye Tian had already severed Xiaozi's sworn bond as his lord's creature and forced Xiaozi to acknowledge Yeyu. It wouldn't be long before he made me acknowledge Lord Yeyu as well. In other words, my fears were justified. On the ground, the war-blood heavenly dragon egg trembled violently. That shell had seemed invulnerable, so hard that even the sect master had been unable to break it. But now there came a sharp crack. The fissure widened, branching out across the surface. Half an hour later, the crack had grown into a huge gap, and a head pushed through. The hatchling's head matched the dragon's from legend. Ye Tian had never seen a real one in this life, only the stories. As the battle-blood heavenly dragon thrust its head forward, the rest of its body cracked free from the shell. In moments, a little dragon just over a meter long stood before him, its scales a deep blood red. It had no wings. It was an Eastern-style dragon. Ye Tian activated his replica talent and inspected the battle-blood heavenly dragon's attributes for the first time, his chest tightening with expectation. Species: Battle-blood dragon, bloodline talent, sunrise level strength. Talent: top defense talent, top speed talent, medium blood eater talent, top flying talent, advanced dragon yan talent, advanced healing talent, medium dragon yin talent, advanced blood and bone talent, medium dragon soul talent, medium. Its core talents, the 10 special abilities, were almost on par with Ye Tian's own. He could have copied more talents easily, but he refused to do so blindly. It would be wasteful to take anything useless. Ye Tian set strict standards for every replication and would not copy any talent that offered him no benefit. The battle-blood heavenly dragon's talent is certainly abnormal, terrifyingly so, but it's a shame there are only 3 top-tier gifts. Ye Tian frowned. If the war-blood heavenly dragon could hear him, it would no doubt snap. Are you hunting for a more talented beast than me? He stopped dwelling on the 10 special talents and instead focused on the dragon's bloodline aptitude, the Shi Sun level. That had to be above the Morning Star rank, but by how many grades did it exceed it? A shadow fell over Ye Tian's face. He had chosen the human path of cultivation, not the way of beasts, and he couldn't bring himself to copy the dragon's bloodline. If he did, his own lineage would shift into the war-blood heavenly dragons, and who knew what consequences would follow. He knew one thing for certain. Once that happened, he could no longer advance the way humans did. He would be forced to progress as a feral beast. This looked promising, but how could he advance once he hit the ceiling of the battle-blood dragon tier? He couldn't just copy a stronger beast. The bloodline conflict would be catastrophic. His only option was to steal the higher-level talents found in the war-blood heavenly dragon, but if the highest rank among war-blood heavenly dragons was the Shi Sun level, wouldn't he still be stuck? Faced with the choice between a rocky, limited path that would render his replication ability useless and a brilliant road of boundless advance, Ye Tian knew which to take. There had to be a way forward. Besides, it was only a day-level talent. There ought to be someone human who possessed it. Battle-blood heavenly dragon, submit to your lord. Ye Tian barked, instantly calling on his beast control ability and directing it at the war-blood heavenly dragon. Despite the war-blood heavenly dragon's Shi-Ri grade bloodline, in its current state it was only a mid-rank fierce beast, not hard for him to dominate. The dragon's struggle was short-lived. Under Ye Tian's control, Its resistance collapsed. It lowered its massive head and acknowledged him as master. With that, the next step of his plan could begin. The Warblood Heavenly Dragon had only just hatched. The moment it opened its eyes, it locked onto Ye Tian and clung to him with obvious attachment, which made Ye Tian's job easy. With a few calm moves, he established control over the newborn and subdued it. A simple thought pushed into his mind. Hungry. Eat. The dragon scrambled back to the shattered egg and began to chew at the indestructible shell. The instant the fragments entered its mouth, they dissolved and flowed into its body as if absorbed. Ye Tian watched, stunned, as the creature's aura swelled with every swallow. By the time the shell was gone, its presence had rocketed to the level of a high-rank ferocious beast. The blood-red scales along its flanks had darkened and become tougher, gleaming with a new luster. Incredible talent, Ye Tian breathed. Its growth rate is terrifying. He had managed to rein in the Warblood Heavenly Dragon just in time. If that beast ever ascended to the top tier of fierce beasts, he'd be finished. He'd be crying over the loss. The replication talent is still on cooldown, Ye Tian said. Once it's ready, I'll copy the blood-devouring talent from the Blood Dragon. Chapter 99. Ye Tian's replication talent still had about 20 days left on its cooldown, and it was early in the morning. During this time, aside from taking part in the daily sword intent practice, he spent his days bonding with the Battle-Blood Heavenly Dragon. The dragon had only just been born. Its spiritual intelligence was immature. Like a human infant, it needed time to develop. Ye Tian discovered something else. The Battle-Blood Heavenly Dragon loved the blood of fierce beasts. It needed to absorb a large amount every day. Even if the prey wasn't of the dragon's own bloodline, it would drink that blood without hesitation. To the young blood dragon, beast blood was like milk, essential nourishment that made it grow. Ye Tian watched it bulking up day by day, its body swelling with each feeding. Although the creature consumed enormous quantities of blood, seeing it thrive filled him with joy. Still, he couldn't ignore the practical problem. With both of them, Ye Tian and the voracious young dragon, relying so heavily on beast blood, the future demand for fierce beast carcasses would be enormous. Fortunately, Xiao Jin still had plenty of fierce beast blood stored, so he wouldn't run out immediately. I was worried, though. Sooner or later, he'd have to go out into the wild regularly to feed his cultivation. If he didn't, the blood would eventually be insufficient. A few days later, Ye Tian made a decision. He would dissolve the bond that tied Xiao Jin to him and allow Xiao Jin to swear himself to Ye Yu instead. Xiao Jin grumbled on and on about it, but in the end he obediently became Ye Yu's beast companion. That wasn't actually shameful. Ye Yu had just taken the heavenly soul flower that Ye Tian had given him, and the flower had transformed his cultivation aptitude to the highest grade. He was certain to become a master in time, and there was even a chance he could reach king level. Once Xiao Jin realized Ye Yu's prospects, he quickly accepted his new position as Ye Yu's animal pet. All of this was settled the day before the talent replication period ended. Ye Tian withdrew from the Sword of Enlightenment, let out a slow breath, and murmured, "Finally, my sword intent has reached 1.9%. All those months of grueling ascetic cultivation and enlightenment won't have been for nothing." At 1.9%, he was tantalizingly close to 2%. That 2% mark was the threshold for cultivating silver-tier sword techniques, skills that often carried special effects beyond a simple boost in combat power. Just one small step further, and he could begin training those silver sword arts. The thought made his heart race. A day later, the replication talent cooldown finished. Ye Tian now had 2 more chances to copy talents. He used the first immediately, Blood Eater talent, the top-tier talent of the Bloodline class. It was exactly the high-level Bloodline gift he needed. Once he copied it into his palm, he could truly shatter the limits of blood refinement. He could push the refining of skin, flesh, bone, and blood beyond their normal bounds, and then attempt the final breakthrough, breaching the limit of the internal organs. If he succeeded, he would be able to forge a flawless foundation. Fusion. The blood-devouring talent merged into Ye Tian. The transformation began. 10 minutes later, the integration was complete, and Ye Tian immediately grasped the talent's true purpose: devour blood and regain life. He felt how transgressive the ability was, a restorative power more extreme than any ordinary healing talent. Healing talents could mend wounds, but they could not replenish vitality itself, because vitality is tied to one's life force and cannot be simply healed. This blood-devouring talent, however, took blood as fuel to restore that life force, a renewal that seemed to defy heaven. Ye Tian had once practiced certain forbidden arts that consumed his life force. His healing talent alone couldn't restore that lost vitality until he gained a blood-devouring talent. If he fed on large quantities of fierce beast blood, that talent could siphon life energy from it and replenish him. What a turnaround. Jackpot, he muttered, barely containing his excitement. With a top-tier blood-devouring talent paired with a top-tier healing talent, no matter how grave his injuries or how stubborn the after-effects, he could now recover quickly. Confident, he put the blood-devouring ability to work and began refining the purple blood alchemy. He was surprised at how well the two abilities merged. The blood-devouring talent could instantly take in vast amounts of high-grade, fierce beast blood, while the purple blood alchemy could tap into and refine the latent power stored deep in his bloodstream, distributing its strength through his entire body. Combined, they accelerated his progress at an astonishing rate. Ye Tian was certain he would break the blood-refining limit within 10 days, far faster than it had taken him to break the skin, flesh, and bone-refining stages. The only downside was the pace. Accelerating his progress burned through beast blood much more quickly. In just a few days, his stores of fierce beast blood were nearly exhausted. Even spending billions to buy high-grade samples only partially replenished what he'd used. 10 days passed. Finally, Ye Tian felt the barrier give way. Broken. The blood-devouring talent and purple blood alchemy pooled a vast surge of energy, shattering the blood-refining ceiling and propelling him into a new realm. His blood itself transformed, flowing like liquid mercury with a faint golden sheen. It was already a tier above ordinary blood and was beginning to evolve toward an even higher state. Still, despite breaking the limit, this new blood level could not be advanced further for the time being. Ye Tian had a plan. The next step was to break through the limit of the internal organs. The 5 Zhang and 6 Fu were simply too restrictive to overcome by talent alone. To truly transcend them, you had to rely on an external force, a gravity formation that could crush the organs and then reshape them, forcing the body into a new pattern. No ordinary person would dare attempt it. Even if they tried, they would need a huge stock of top-grade healing elixirs, and the process would take a very long time. One failed attempt could leave you recovering for months. Ye Tian was different. He possessed an extraordinary healing gift. As long as his organs weren't utterly destroyed, he could repair them quickly. Unless the head is damaged, he told himself, there's no way I couldn't recover. That confidence made the idea feasible, but only if he could find a gravity array strong enough to do the job. Without one, breaking the organ limit was impossible. A gravity array? Ye Tian remembered the Cultivation Tower at the Demon Sea Grand Base, a project funded by several of the great families. It was packed with arrays, Yuan Qi arrays, gravity arrays, and a host of auxiliary formations that sped cultivation, sharpened reflexes, and enhanced combat ability. The facilities were versatile and powerful, but access came at a steep price. Only the wealthy could afford regular use. Without hesitation, he went straight to the tower. In the central district of the Demon Sea Grand Base stood the Demon Sea Cultivation Tower, 500 meters tall with 50 floors, each 10 meters high, and each floor crammed with cultivation chambers. At the first floor entrance, attendants stood ready to collect the entrance fees. Ye Tian pulled out his ID. How much for the highest level gravity chamber per day? The highest, the attendant repeated. That's the king-level gravity chamber, for king-tier cultivation. There are only 3 of them, and they're all taken by the 3 king-level lords. The next tier down is the heaven-level gravity chamber. That's what top sect masters use. You're only a great martial artist. You don't need something that advanced. Then give me a heaven-level chamber, Ye Tian said without hesitation. The attendant hesitated for a moment, then replied, 50 million a day. Chapter 100. I'll pay for a month up front, Ye Tian said. 1.5 billion yuan for 1 month. The attendant stared at him, stunned. He couldn't believe that Ye Tian, a top-tier martial artist, was willing to spend 1.5 billion yuan for a month in a heavenly-grade gravity cultivation chamber. That was outrageous. Most masters didn't dare stay in a heavenly chamber for a full month. A few days was the norm. Gravity chambers were mainly used to break bottlenecks. Cranking up the gravitational pressure could help smash the limits of one's body and force a breakthrough to a higher level. They weren't intended for long-term cultivation. The truly sought-after rooms were the Yuan Qi cultivation chambers. Staying inside those significantly accelerated one's progress compared with training outside. Ye Tian paid the fee without hesitation and received the key to the heavenly chamber. The heavenly-grade gravity chambers are on the 8th floor, the attendant explained. You can enter any chamber that hasn't been activated by a formation. Ye Tian nodded and boarded the Yuanli elevator, heading up to the 8th floor of the cultivation tower. Ye Tian stumbled across an unoccupied gravity chamber and slipped inside. He activated the defensive formation and the sound-dampening array so no one could disturb him. He took a moment to sense the air. The heaven and earth Yuan Qi here was at least 3 times denser than outside, he realized with a low murmur. And this was only a gravity chamber. A Yuanli cultivation chamber would concentrate qi far beyond this. Those rooms were even rarer and far more valuable. If he could learn to set up formations well enough to convert a gravity chamber into a Yuanli cultivation chamber by himself, his progress would surge. Training in such a chamber would advance him far faster than ordinary solitary cultivation. Still, that was a long-term plan. It wasn't urgent now. He needed to break the current limits of his internal organs and forge an unshakable foundation before aiming higher. Ye Tian glanced around the chamber and found a book tucked away that taught techniques for manipulating gravity. The heavenly gravity chamber could be adjusted from 1 times to 1,000 times gravity. The recommended ranges were clear. Warriors, 1 to 5 is. Elite warriors, 520 kevs. Great warriors, 20 to 100 tabs. Masters, 100,000 tabs. It was Ye Tian's first time inside the chamber. Nervous, he didn't dare start at the very top and set the dial to 100 times. The chamber thundered to life. A crushing force slammed into him, so intense he felt his internal organs shift and be wounded. In theory, given his cultivation level, he could tolerate 100 times, but his body had never experienced such pressure before. His organs weren't used to it and suffered for that reason. Ye Tian activated his healing talent. The pain and damage sealed almost instantly. 10 minutes later, he stood steady, completely adapted to 100 times gravity. 100 times is the usual upper limit a great warrior can endure, he thought. If I want to break my bodily limits, I have to push higher. Carefully, he increased the setting. 101 times, 102 us, 103 times gravity. Ye Tian kept turning the dial up, inching the pressure higher and higher. His skin and muscles held up fine. It was only his internal organs that began to buckle under the strain, fine fissures appearing as the force pushed them toward failure. Each time that happened, he simply activated his top-tier healing talent. The damage closed and vanished almost instantly. There was never any real danger to his life. Gradually, with each session, his tolerance rose. Half a month later, he could endure 108 times gravity, and even then, he hadn't yet hit the true limit of his organs. He pushed on, 110 grams, 115 grams, 120 grams. The numbers climbed and a month slipped away. When that month ended, he didn't stop. He added another month in the gravity chamber and kept cultivating. Breaking the limits of the internal organs proved far harder than breaking other limits. He understood why now. He had been deliberately trying to push the organs without ying on the specific talents that would directly bolster them. It made progress slower and more painful, but it taught him far more about his thresholds. More importantly, he knew the method would work if he persisted. 124 times, Ye Tian whispered, then drew a deep breath. By then it had been 50 days since Ye Tian entered the cultivation tower. He had already endured the tower's gravity at 124 times normal, and each step up had become harder and harder. He could feel a limit pressing on him like shackles. Maybe, he thought, if he tried 125 times, he could break it. After a long rest to restore himself to peak condition, Ye Tian activated the 125 times gravity setting. Click. His insides felt as if they were being shattered. Fortunately, his supreme healing talent worked at an astonishing speed, mending the damage as quickly as it occurred. Organs ruptured and then knitted themselves back together in a brutal, repeating cycle. The pain was beyond imagining, but Ye Tian gritted his teeth and endured. He needed to forge a flawless foundation. Hours crawled by. Then, at a single decisive moment, the shackles that had bound his lower realm finally gave way. A rumble rolled through him as countless streams of heaven and earth yuan qi poured into his 5 internal organs. Power flooded them, strengthening them until they easily withstood the 125 times gravity. His organs began to glow with a faint, multicolored radiance. "Success!" Ye Tian cried out, exhilarated. But as his excitement surged, he realized this was only the beginning. The true transformation was just starting. Ye Tian felt it in every fiber of his being. As a cold, otherworldly energy poured into him, his skin, muscles, bones, and organs answered in turn. The body convulsed and shifted as if being squeezed through an invisible press, and from its depths a stream of foul, black impurities poured out, clotted toxins and filth that under normal circumstances could never be expelled. The nauseating process lasted an hour. "It stinks," he muttered, staring at the black residue clinging to his skin. Luckily, the building's 8th floor had a special bathing area. He went straight there to wash away the worst of it before returning to the gravity room. After bathing, Ye Tian stood still and probed his body with practiced precision. He felt something fundamental had changed. Defensive aptitude, brute strength, the rare diamond bone trait, and even his blood-devouring ability no longer sat isolated on a talent list. They had fused into his flesh and structure, each one integrating with different parts of his body. "Maybe my talent has transformed," he thought, then reached out instinctively to check his talent status. "This." Ye Tian frowned. His talent readings had shifted dramatically. His defense, strength, diamond bone, and blood eater talents no longer showed as top tier. Each one now carried the same new label, Upanishad, pseudo. He stared at the words. Upanishad talents were supposed to sit above the special class top talents, a completely different and far rarer category of aptitude. He'd assumed that an Upanishad talent meant something extraordinary, but the addition of pseudo made it clear these weren't genuine Upanishads at all. Curious and unsettled, Ye Tian rented the power-measuring equipment from the Cultivation Tower. He wanted to test precisely how these pseudo-Upanishad talents affected his amplification multiplier.